Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, the cockroach peeking out through the well of the worlds, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Oh, just chittering.
Chittering away. You know you're going to die just by the air, right?
It's worth it.
Oh, okay, cool. This week on the show, Fairy Tale continues as we discuss chapters 6 through 10 of Stephen King's novel. Charlie's relationship continues to grow with Howard Bowditch until, unfortunately, the old man dies suddenly of a heart attack. But before he goes, he leaves Charlie a message, and that message is a key to a whole new world. And we'll be figuring out about that world, I guess, in the weeks to come. Matt, what did you think of this week's reading? 5 more chapters, a little bit more plot movement, but not much. What did you think?
Not much plot movement, as you say. The interesting thing about this book is, short aside, when we were on our tour of Bangor, the bus driver asked us what our favorite Stephen King book was, and or maybe it was story. And you know me, my favorite varies moment to moment, but in that moment I said Low Men in Yellow Coats.
Yeah.
So clearly I like this thing that King does.
Yeah.
And we're doing a lot of that in this book, in a different way, right? It doesn't, the kid is older, the relationship is different, the context is different, the time period is different, but the approach is similar, and that's what's very fun to me. So, yes, I admit I'm a little, I think fair to say, frustrated at the intensity with which I wish to know the answers to these mysteries and the lack of answers being provided. But I'm more enjoying the character stuff. So it more than balances out for me. How about you?
Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I think frustrated is a good word. I think impatient is the word for how I kind of felt as we rounded the end of this week's reading, and I realized we were going to get the setup for this well that's going to transfer us to the world of fairy, but not actually get to walk through it quite yet. I think we said last week if we made it through this week's chapters and he hadn't crossed that threshold, we were going to be disappointed. Well, we didn't, and I guess I feel a little disappointed, but I think I'm with you that I'm just really enjoying these characters. I really enjoyed Howard Bowditch. I was very sad when he passed away. I think halfway through the reading, it became very apparent that that's where we were going. And this is before King comes right out and says, this is where we're going. But I just continue to enjoy Charlie's relationships with his father, with Bowditch, and I continue to enjoy Charlie overall as a character. He's, I think deceptively complicated, because I think he comes off as very, very simple on the surface, in that he just seems like a really good dude. He's just a good kid. And he continues to make seemingly the correct decision whenever he's faced by an opportunity to not. But I think there's some complexity underneath there that I'm looking forward to. Perhaps his journey down the well will expose, but we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to necessarily have the whole conversation here, but there's several moments in this week's reading and obviously last week's reading where we were reminded that this kid suffered a horrible loss. And that is kind of always under the surface, and it pops up a few times. I think I do feel like, that's not just got to give the kid a backstory. I feel like that's going to be an active component in his character.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I agree. Continue to really enjoy this. Thanks everyone for the feedback after last week's episode. Matt, there's a lot of people taking, I think if I had to be honest with you, a certain cruel joy at my inability to pretend like I'm smarter than you because I know the events of the book and you don't. There's people really enjoying me being just as lost as you are. And also there's some people that seem to think that some of our speculations were wrong, which is just, I think, ridiculous. We're 12 for 12 after week 1. I think everything we said that was going to come to pass has. So
absolutely,
I don't know what these people are talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've never made a mistake in prediction, clearly.
No, neither of you. No,
No, no.
I'm sure. Honestly, I don't even remember all the things we said last week. I know we got some of them right. Like I think some of the more specific ones, and also more obvious ones, we got right. But I think there's some details we didn't. I'm still very interested in some of your theories on Charlie, and I'm sure we'll get into that this week. But thanks for everyone for the feedback. I'm glad y'all are enjoying this kind of final shift in the story structure of this podcast. So we're enjoying it too. It's been a lot of fun. It has.
Yeah, we sure are.
All right, Matt, before we get into the chapters, we did just want to remind folks that we do have a Patreon. That's patreon.com/doofmedia. And on that Patreon, we occasionally, at least once a month, have bonus podcasts. One of them is our ongoing series discussing the television series Castle Rock, a couple episodes at a time. And our newest episode has just been released of that. We are on season 2, episodes 7 and 8 of Castle Rock. So this will be the penultimate episode. We'll be wrapping up the season and the show next month. But I've been really enjoying those conversations, Matt, even though I don't think I enjoyed this month's episodes quite as much as I had in the past. But it's been fun talking about Castle Rock nonetheless.
Still really enjoying that show overall, even if these last 2 episodes were some of our less favorite.
Yeah. If you want to see that and all the other episodes of that show and all the other bonus stuff we've done over there, you can head to patreon.com/doofmedia, pledge at, I believe it's the Doof Troop level or higher, and it'll unlock hours and hours and hours and hours of bonus content for y'all, and more coming every month.
A whole new show.
Check that out.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Matt, let's get into it. Chapter 6. Our title here is Hospital Visit, The Safe, Stantonville, Gold Greed, Mr. Bowditch Comes Home. Matt, we begin this week with Charlie back in the hospital once again to visit Howard Bowditch. We figure we're finally going to get some, I don't know, maybe some fairy-like answers to some of the questions we've been having about this whole thing. Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, that all has to wait until the end of this week's reading, but we do get to learn about some gold a little bit here. And we do spend some time. And I think actually, as you said, we're spending a lot of time in this part of the book. And a lot of these chapters are just Stephen King saying, I need to establish the relationship between these two men. Like, I really need to spend some time on Bowditch and Charlie and making sure before we move on to the rest of the story that the relationship between these two men is firmly established. Like if you want to like break things down section wise, I feel like the first 5 chapters were more focused on Charlie's relationship with Radar, and these 5 feel much more specific to Charlie's relationship with Bowditch. And that's kind of what we're doing here at the beginning too, as he gives him a sponge bath for the first time.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here in this week's reading that makes me just, I think, just on mostly just a vibes basis, want to back off on my, Charlie is actually a secret serial killer theory, because like he just is this solid dude who does all these selfless, wonderful things for this man, and I don't like. At a certain point, you stop asking for motives. You're just like, I don't know, like he's consistently a great, reliable dude for several months, and like at a certain point, that's just you just have to be like, okay, that's who this character is. Like I much more relaxed on Charlie as a character. I wanted to say that up front because there just doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence for my paranoid delusions this week.
I think you're right, but I do think you're not entirely right, because I feel like every time I'm convinced that you are being paranoid and wrong, there is a moment where we once again circle back around to how Charlie's just driven by the guilt of the things he did when he was younger. And I just feel like we keep bringing this around too much for it to just simply be a character beat. Now, I could be totally wrong here. Very, very possible. But it feels like we're bringing this up enough times that it's going to pay off in some way or another. Now, I think what we said last week was I remained unconvinced that it was going to pay off in the manner of, haha, you thought this was a good guy the whole time and he's not. I just feel like we're going to pay this off in some way. And I think there's a couple moments in this week's reading that reinforce that for me once again. So I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's how I feel. I mean, we're definitely setting something up. It's just I'm no longer sure what exactly.
Sure, fair,
Um,
yeah.
I guess another upfront comment is like, um, I I don't say this to sort of pile criticism on the book because, like I said a second ago, I'm enjoying the slow paced character exploration, a la Low Men in Yellow Coats. But I can see like the beginning of this book hitting people the wrong way. Like if you pick up a book, it's called Fairy Tale. There's an explicitly fantastical cover on the book. You know it's by renowned horror novelist Stephen King, master of horror. And then it's got like 200 pages of subtle character work. And you're like, when are we going to get to the magical land fireworks factory? Um, I
Mhm.
can see getting frustrated. Maybe there's other reasons some people bounce off the book. But I was kind of sitting back from this and I was like, if this weren't sort of my exact jam, I can see being a little annoyed at the book's pace so far.
Yeah, I get that, and I think I agree with you there. I do think one thing, and I don't know very much about this book at all, but one thing I did see in, I think we joked last week about how people are very, very excited to tell you that they don't like fairy tale.
Yeah.
One of the things I saw in some of the brief kind of complaints I read that didn't go into too much detail, or I wouldn't have read them, was that people really enjoyed the first half of the book, but the book lost them in the second half. And I thought that was a really interesting thing for people to say. And this is not something like I saw one person or two people say. I saw several people say this, which made me think that this is a more highly shared opinion, which surprises me because I came to the same conclusion you did while reading this week's reading. It's like, oh, this is why people don't like this book. Like we're we're drawing this out and we're waiting a long time to get to these moments, and people are going to get impatient with this novel. But then, so I'm kind of at a loss right now. Of okay, so what I'm basically hearing is people enjoyed the long drive to the fireworks factory, but then didn't like the fireworks.
Uh-huh.
Which I mean, it is possible, right? If you take your time building up to something, and then the thing you build up to doesn't pay off in a satisfactory way, it that long build hurts it even more than if you had just gotten to it early. So I don't know. We'll see. I'm trying not to be overly influenced by what people are saying about this book, but yeah, I mean, it's on my mind. I would be lying if I said it wasn't.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So now I don't know what to think.
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I don't know. I did like this quote right here, Matt. As Charlie gives Mr. Bowditch his first sponge bath, we get this little comment right here. We never know when the turning points come in our relationships with others, and it was only later that I realized that was one for us. I just love that, like this moment of realization that, oh, this relationship has moved beyond just young kids who saved the life of this old man into something deeper and more profound and more meaningful for both of them, and that's really cool.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful.
So Bowditch mentions here that it's almost time for his hospital payment to come due, and he doesn't have insurance, and he's planning to pay for the whole thing in cash, but he needs Charlie's help. This involves Charlie getting into Howard's gold nugget stash and selling it to a third party. But I think it is interesting, Matt, how King kind of withholds that from us for a while. Like we do this thing that he has done in previous books, and we've talked about, where Bowditch and Charlie have the conversation about the gold, but we don't actually get to see that conversation until Charlie is at the home, staring at the open safe, looking at the pail of gold. Then we get to see the conversation. So he kind of holds it back from us, and I think he's definitely like laying it on thick with the mystery of Bowditch and where he comes from and what this thing is, and the central intrigue of who this person is King is leaning into for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a really compelling mystery. Like that's maybe
Yeah.
one of the things causing me the most, emotions and tension in the story is like, where does this gold come from? Who is this guy? What is in the shed? I mean, the gold specifically, to me, for some reason, is almost more alluring than the question of like, what's in the shed? I think partially because I'm just like, this shed's a tunnel. I already know that. But the gold, you're like, okay, what? Okay, even with the gold, we're like, okay, we know he got it from the land of fairy. Like that's clearly where we were going to go. But what is the context of that? Like, what is the story behind that? Because it really is the premise of a fairy tale, right? Like we have all these Jack and the Beanstalk references, which I'm sure we'll get to. And it's like, yeah, he went instead of up the beanstalk, he went down the well and he stole the fairy from the gold from what, right? Like, what's
Mhm.
there's got to be some story here that uh, it's just pushing all my buttons of curiosity.
Yeah, especially since the gold is in like very specific, like perfectly round BB shaped nuggets, which is
Hmm.
just not how you would typically see gold. Like even in a fairy tale, like I'm thinking of like Rumpelstiltskin and weaving straw into gold, right? It has a very specific look that is not little tiny BBs of gold, right? You know, and that I think becomes almost more intriguing because they're not ingots, they're not it's not clearly straw, they're not like rough ore. It's little BBs, and I don't know, that makes it even more intriguing for me. Like what produces BBs of gold? I don't know.
Yeah, that's funny. I never consciously asked myself that question, but that was a little thing that I was like, yeah, why BBs? That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Charlie heads home, unlocks the safe, and finds a bucket of gold, 40 pounds, we're told roughly, which under today's exchange rate is just under $1.2 million. A lot of money. This is interesting, though, Matt. In the book, it says that gold is selling at about just under 20,000 a pound.
Hmm.
When I looked up today's rate, it's about 30,000. So this book came out in 2013, I think.
Hmm.
So in 10 years, the value of gold has gone up pretty quickly. An additional $10,000 a pound is a lot. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, when I was in undergraduate, there was this guy in my classes who was this big gold bug, and he was always saying that we should put all our money in gold, and I was always like, "You crazy fool!" And I'm sure he's really rich now, and because
just
gold,
just just because he's rich doesn't mean he's not a crazy fool. Let's be clear.
well, he's a rich crazy fool. Yeah, but I mean, the
Yeah.
price of gold has just gone up a lot over the last decades, over the last couple decades specifically.
Why do I mean this is a complete tangent, but do we know why that is? Like what dictates the market price of ore?
Well, a lot of it is an inflation of the dollar, so the dollar has
Sure.
become less valuable, and the gold supply does not change very much. I'm sure there's like all kinds of other subtle reasons that an economist
Mhm.
would say, but I think that's a big one.
How rare of a metal is gold? Because like, you know, there's things in these markets like, you know, the whole thing about diamonds aren't actually that rare, and the diamond market is propped up by companies like almost obsessively and fascistically limiting supply in order to drive the price of them up. Is that like I I don't know why I'm asking you these questions as if, hey, you do earth stuff, you know all
Yeah,
things about rocks, right?
and I like money. I think gold is like fairly priced based on its rarity. I mean, definitely nation states will have stockpiles of it. Um, but like the fact that they're hoarding it, I don't think is why it's expensive. Like, I think it's just it's considered to be a store of value too. Like, that's another part of it. It's like there's
Yeah.
all, economics is weird. It's like, why is Bitcoin the price that it is? I don't know, because that's the price people will sell it for, right? Like, there's no answer beyond that ultimately, right? So
Yeah.
that's, the price of gold, the price of anything really is just a kind of an epiphenomenon of an underlying process that uh, I don't know, but I think gold is pretty rare. I might have this wrong. It'll be really funny if I'm wrong, because it's always funny when I'm wrong. But I seem to remember that gold is like the fusion product of things that are produced by supernovae, meaning you have to have two supernovae to produce gold. Like, you have to have one supernova to produce the stuff that then finds its way into a star, which is then fused into gold in the second supernova. I might have this totally wrong, but I think that might be true. So this kind of thing tells you why certain metals are rare. Is it's like, oh, that just doesn't sound like it's going to happen very often. Um,
Hmm. I didn't know there was a plural of supernova.
yeah,
So I've learned something new today. I like that.
I mean,
I
I think
would have just called it supernovas or
supernovas.
supersnova. Supersnova.
I mean, I think the funny thing also was when I learned that fact, I simultaneously learned that there's been enough time in the universe for there to be two consecutive stars being born and then exploding, and then another star being born from the first explosion and then exploding. And then now we have our solar system, which I guess is the third one. So
Hell yeah, we're doing it.
we're doing
That's why we got the gold. I do think this is an important conversation though, in related to this book we're supposed to be talking about. In that, like, I think this part and a lot of this chapter gets into Charlie's real kind of fascination with this gold, like the allure of this gold. Like it almost feels supernatural, right? It almost feels a little fairy how like into the gold he immediately is. Like the whole having to pick it up and wash it over his hands. I think this is really interesting because it does feel borderline like this is the ring of power hypnotizing our character, but it also is just kind of like human beings. We just talked about the market of gold. What is gold, as you said, but a rock we've placed value on because we find it pretty and fascinating and fun to look at, right? Like that's essentially all it is. And I just feel like this is something that's just true universally, and I kind of like how we're seeing Charlie react to it in what is, I think, essentially a very human way.
I love that you brought that up and I feel like this is a pervasive motif beyond just the gold thing, that like it's the idea of being fascinated by gold is a concept that feels very fey. Like you think of the dwarves of Tolkien, where they love the gold and the mithril and the gemstones. Like it's like a very special and particular thing to them. But the reason Tolkien gave that to the dwarves is that we kind of have a little bit of that too. When we see a bunch of gems, there's something very kind of powerful in some ways when you go to like the gems exhibit at a museum or what have you, and you look at all the gems and you're like, oh, ooh, I want to touch them. And I would totally run my hands through a big pile of gold if it was in front of me. Like you wouldn't be able to stop yourself, right?
I mean, every single human being on the planet has at one point wanted to jump into Scrooge McDuck's giant vault swimming pool of gold. So yeah,
his swimming pool of soft, floaty gold.
Stop! Don't ruin it for me or anyone else. Don't you do that? It would work. It would work fine.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
thank you.
Fine.
Charlie follows instructions and weighs out 7 pounds of gold to bring to Bowditch's dealer. I really loved this quote here. Like when Charlie's kind of explaining why he's doing all this thing, like and why he's so into this, we get this line: "I was 17 years old, and this was the most exciting thing that had ever happened to me, by far, and I wanted to chase it." I love that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it says something about Charlie that he even feels the need to justify this, because I'm like, who wouldn't be down for this kind of adventure? Like at this point, it seems relatively low risk, relatively, promising some intrigue and at the very least a good story. It's like, but Charlie is such a sort of goody two shoes, honestly, that he's like, let me explain to you why I was willing to do this. It's like, dude, you don't have to explain. We're good.
I mean, I think you're right that this is just very true to who we understand as Charlie. But I also think if we want to attempt to read into this a little further, we know the story being crafted for us is once again one that occurs after the fact, and Charlie is as a much older person relaying the events of this book to us. And we know that the story ends badly, right? That's something that he's set up from pretty well the beginning, is that, things started out good, but it was only bad in the end, I think, is the quote that we see in this chapter just a little bit later. And so I do wonder if part of what we're seeing here with Charlie, and maybe with even the regret around past events of his childhood we're seeing here, is this real need for him, as he builds this narrative of what happened to him, to make an argument for why he did what he ends up doing, or perhaps how he got into the situation where this bad, terrible, no good thing happened. Again, pure speculation, but I'm very aware of what you just said there, is that like he feels the need to justify this, he feels the need to justify that, he feels the need to explain to us why he's behaving the way he's behaving throughout all of these chapters so far.
Mm. Yeah, right. And to be clear, I mean, yeah, I guess I just agree. Like, that's who his character is. He's a guy who wants everything to be above board, and so he's explaining and justifying, maybe even when sort of a more normal character. Okay, let me interrupt myself, because it's like the character that you expect to go on an adventure story is more of a sort of impulsive, usually younger character, right? Like,
Mhm.
I think that's one reason why we end up with so many of these stories where it's a younger kid, or why Traveling Jack is 11, is because, like, you don't expect them to second guess themselves. They're just gonna, if the opportunity presents itself and there's a threat, or whatever, or a motivation, you just expect them to go for it. You're not going to judge them for it. That this is an older, more thoughtful character, very conscientious character, and in some ways, like, intentionally a bad fit for this type of story. Like, that's a it's a fun thing we're doing with this, is he's sort of not the character that you would design to be the protagonist for a fairy tale, and that's more interesting to me, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I go right back to the fact of, like, for a fairy tale and for a Stephen King story about a young boy, Charlie is too old.
Mm.
He is. He's too old. 17 years old is too old. Like, the Narnia stories all have younger kids. Stephen, like, Talisman has younger kid. Like, Jack,
Mm-hmm.
Jake, like, all of these characters are always younger kids. And I keep going back to this idea that this was an intentional choice to make him a 17-year-old. Like, we're about to talk about Jack and the Beanstalk, and there's another example where I don't actually know how old Jack and the Beanstalk is, by the way. But he never read to me as, like, a basic adult. He read to me as a probably 11, 12, 13-year-old kid.
Yeah, he was whatever age I was when I was being told the story as a child.
Okay, so 8.
Yeah, between 3 and 9.
Actually, how old Jack and the Beanstalk? How old is Jack?
I
12, it says.
Okay, sure.
This is AI though, so it's in Jack, the true story of Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack is 12 years old. Okay.
So I think just it's meant to be vague, right?
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
not 17.
Yeah. No. So, I mean, and all that to be said is that I keep paying very close attention to why 17. I keep asking myself this question, and yeah, we don't have a clear answer on it yet. I mean, I think we talked about perhaps some reasons last week, and maybe we'll find some more as we continue to go through the story. But yeah, it's something that's on my mind for sure.
Cool.
Speaking of which, as Charlie is riding his bike downtown, he does think about Jack and the Beanstalk, because he feels like Jack returning down the beanstalk with the golden goose in his backpack. And this is so I wanted to talk to you about this really quick, Matt, because this is a fun, very specific Kingian thing, I think. This is a book called Fairy Tale, and King knows that every person reading this book is aware that it is a book called Fairy Tale. And so he is very specifically and intentionally dropping fairy tale devices throughout the story. Like, we're about to talk about how Bowditch is a huntsman, which is a very fairy tale character. And now we have our character here specifically thinking about, hey, I feel like Jack and the Beanstalk. And this is not going to be the last time Charlie thinks and talks about Jack and the Beanstalk this week. But he's priming you. He's both priming you for what is to come, and also acknowledging that you kind of already know what the story is on a certain level.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I mean, and it's fun. Like, it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about fairy tales. Like, I think this is a thing that I was thinking while he was, reminding us of Jack and the Beanstalk. I'm like, I like fairy tales. It reminds me of sort of Tolkien's attitude of, like, fairy stories, fairy tales are dismissed as a childish thing, but actually there's a lot of, like, they're actually just good narratives. Like, they've got a sort of wisdom to them. Like, there's a reason why they lasted as long as they did, why they get passed down. It's because they're just good story structures. Like Jack and the
Yeah.
Beanstalk, it's probably been 35 years, not that long, 30 years at least since I read Jack and the Beanstalk, but I feel like I could just tell the whole story, right? It's got a very natural structure.
Yeah.
The same is true for most fairy tales. So, and I think King recognizes that, and he's kind of playing with that.
Hmm.
Um, another, okay, so more this book specific thought that I was having along these lines, relevant to what you were just saying, is like, I think one of the reasons why we're priming the reader on these fairy tale ideas is that this could end up being like a very literal, like plot relevant invocation of like, oh, Jack and the Beanstalk is a story about a guy who actually lived, who instead of going down the beanstalk, maybe he went down the well, like 200 years ago or something, and there was a giant, and he defeated the giant, and like it could be that all of our fairy tales are echoes of this magical land that Charlie has stumbled upon.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that idea. There's a line at the very end of chapter 10, where Bowditch is describing the sundial that is
Mhm.
rotating like a carousel in a Bradbury novel. And he says something to the effect of, it turns like a carousel in this novel, the Bradbury novel. I'm sure he, and then he stops himself. And it's like, I'm sure he would have described it the same way, like, like
Uh-huh.
to the point where I immediately in my head jumped on what you're just saying here, which is like, oh, perhaps we're going to do this thing. We're going to make this world much more metatextual to the larger world of fairy tale than we thought. Like, this is not just a fairy tale we're reading. This is the fairy tale, and that would be a very Kingian thing to do, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to tell just one instance of a story like this type. I'm going to make my one instance of a story of this type represent the entire concept of the story of this type.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly the kind of thing that he would do. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yep. So as he's going downtown and kind of waiting for the gold dealer to open a shop for him, we get this, and this is a classic King moment, where if it goes, I can't swear that Christopher Polly was there that morning. I can't swear that he wasn't. Polly was the kind of guy who could fade into the landscape until he was ready for you to see him. He could have been in the diner chowing down on bacon and eggs. He could have been in the bus shelter pretending to study the guitars and boom boxes in the Stantonville Pawn and Loan. Or he could have been nowhere. All I can say is that I don't remember anyone in a retro White Sox hat, the kind with the red circle on the front. Maybe he wasn't wearing it, but I never saw that son of a bitch without it. So this is one of the things where you're turning pages and reading the book where you stop and go, did I miss something? Did I forget something? Was this name dropped last week and I just forgot about it? No, I mean, what he's doing is he's just dropping this character, dropping this name without warning suddenly in the middle of this book, to where you're like, okay, sure. And you don't really know what to make of it. But you're paying attention. You're primed now.
Mhm.
And I really like the detail of the Chicago White Sox hat. Like, this is not like describing as a red circle on the front. I like baseball a fair amount, Matt, and I
Mhm.
know a fair amount about like different baseball teams' logos, and I was like, when the fuck did the White Sox have a red circle on their cap? So I went and looked at this, and they did actually have one. I think I put it in the script for you here. This is one that I think was their logo from like the early 70s up until the early 90s, when they adopted their current logo, which is just like a SOX socks in black and white, which is what their logo still is to this day. But I just did not remember this logo at all, and it makes it very unique, and you pay attention to it, because I don't think anyone expects red in a White Sox logo. Like, you see red, you think Red Sox. That's just what you do.
Yeah.
And I don't know, really interesting choice here.
Yeah, very specific and sort of random choice, right? And as you say, we're sort of interjecting into the story with this reference to this character we haven't met yet. So he's clearly somebody who's going to be important later, and we're just
Hmm.
priming like he might have been here. We don't know. He's the guy who would be interested in this situation. So maybe he
Yeah.
was here, and I think it's also meant to imply that this is probably the guy that kills the pawn shop guy later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing, I might be getting some wires crossed here, but like, if isn't this guy also described as being quite short?
He's short. He kind of skips around a
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Um,
He he's a leprechaun.
yeah, he's just a fucking leprechaun.
Yeah,
Yes.
he's
Thank you.
looking for
Thank
the
you for being the first one to say it. So when we're wrong,
yeah.
it was you that said it, not me.
He's looking for his gold.
He's looking for his pot of gold.
his pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Yeah, and like that's what this is. Okay, so we're good. But he's a leprechaun who wears a White Sox hat. So
But, yeah. Why?
why? And part of the thing. Okay, so it's like, when I say he's a leprechaun, is it like he's literally a magical leprechaun, or more like we're playing in the land of tropes, and so we're going to have a short guy who is really gold hungry, and you're meant to think leprechaun, but it's not like, oh no, he wasn't born from a long line of leprechauns. He just like that's the trope we're trying to gesture at, and we don't really know enough to say that yet.
I should have looked up this name to see
Christopher
that.
Polly.
Yeah. I just Googled it, and the first thing is a Reddit comment that I'm worried if I read any more, it's going to be a spoiler, so I will just avoid that. But I don't think there's a clear immediate jump to this name is supposed to indicate something for you. But no, he's a leprechaun. I like that there are multiple options here, that you're right. Like, is he just the real version of what we now understand as leprechauns, or is King just playing with this idea and this trope? Either way, I think you're absolutely right. That's what we're doing. And I think that's what we're supposed to think. I mean, maybe not right here, but by the time the neighbor is describing him, I feel like that's the conclusion we're supposed to have reached. And I'm actually maybe a little bit surprised that Charlie didn't get there yet. I think he probably will pretty soon. To be fair, he hasn't actually seen him himself yet. I think when he does see him, he's probably going to just be like, oh yeah, leprechaun.
Yeah. I think Charlie's sort of slow rolling this stuff in his telling of the story.
Yeah. So Charlie trades the gold to Heinrich, the gold seller, jewelry seller, and this is like an interesting character here. We only get to meet really just the once, and then he dies, so we're probably not going to see him again. He's this clearly like greedy man who almost is immediately trying to ply Charlie with more information. Like you almost can't blame him for that, because you try to understand like what this must be for him, where this old man has for the past 30 years been constantly selling him a supply of gold in just like weird BBs that are unstamped, unmarked, untraceable, seemingly never ending, and he's always willing to sell it at a cheaper rate than the market price is. So like, yes, Heinrich is clearly a greedy man who like wants more of the gold and wants to find out how much gold he actually has and yada yada yada. But like, he also probably is just as hankering for the answers to the who is a Howard Bowditch questions that we have as well, right?
Yeah. No, totally. I mean, I did catch a vibe that he just wants to steal this guy's gold if he can, like if he can get away with it.
Oh yeah,
but also,
sure.
I think at the same time, like you said, he's just like, what the hell is this? I did think it was funny. This kind of just reminded me of our whole long and winding 11/22/63 conversation, where we were like, okay, the actual practical realities of trying to like, get money magically out of thin air are quite serious and irritating. And it's like, yeah, so like if you had a giant pot of gold, and you needed to sell it off in a way that didn't cause any questions to be asked, I have no idea how to go about that, right? Like it's one of those things where it sounds like, oh yeah, it's all good, it's all upside, until you actually think about it, and then you're like, yeah, you'd probably have to take a haircut on some of this gold to find somebody who would basically launder it for you.
Yeah, definitely. I love that when Heinrich dies, like Bowditch's first reaction is not "oh bummer." It's
Uh-huh.
like "ah fuck, where am I gonna get to offload the rest of this gold now?"
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. This
Which
is so hard to find a
yeah,
good
it
gold
it
smuggler.
also I think demonstrates that he is fully aware that Heinrich is kind of just a piece of shit, right? And I think
Mhm.
that is the vibe we're supposed to get from him, right? Like I think one of the first things he says to Charlie is he's like, "Hey, tell me where the rest of the gold is, and just take the leftover. He you weighed it a little too heavy. Just take it. He'll never notice."
Mhm.
Which I do think is like talking again and again about Charlie. Um, he's not even really tempted by any of that,
Mhm.
right? Like there's no despite the fact that he clearly has this gold greed, this allure, this fascination with the gold. There's never any moment in the book where you believe he's even considering doing that, and
Mhm.
I think that is interesting. And um I know we've already talked about this a little bit, but this is one of those moments that I really was like, nah, I don't think Matt's right about this Charlie is a piece of shit thing, actually.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Like, I don't have anything more to add than what we already talked about. I think it actually kind of annoys me that I got so worked up about it, because now I think maybe I just like was reading the book wrong for a while, and
Eh.
was like looking for these things that aren't there. I know, like, I think it's fine. I know in the past I've practically ruined books for myself by like deciding really early that we were doing a certain thing with a character, and then it's just like, no, you just latched onto the wrong thing. And it always sucks when that happens.
Yeah, I mean it does, but it happens, and I think that's part of the journey for us here, and I think we'll get there in the end for sure. That is another benefit of rereading, right? Is that you get to come into the book knowing exactly what it is and what it's doing, and it allows you to perhaps appreciate that stuff a little better.
True.
All right, so it's finally time for Bowditch to come home. And Matt, we haven't talked about Radar much this week, but the sheer joy that this dog feels when Bowditch returns is just I love this so much. I love this dog so much. Save the dog, Charlie. Save it. Go down the well. Save the dog. You have to do it right now. Go.
Yes, that's all I care about at this point. That's the entire stakes for me.
Yep.
Radar.
Yep. Radar is all the stakes I need.
Yep.
After getting instructions on how to help Bowditch and how to dole out his pain medication, Charlie, for the first time, finds him alone in the house with the old man. And I loved this quote so much here, Matt. "You okay?" I asked. He dropped his arm and turned his head to look at me. His expression was desolate. "I'm in a deep hole, Charlie. I don't know if I can climb out." Like, so I love this comment because this is one of those really clever things that I think we're doing here. Knowing what we know now, the meaning of this becomes much, much, much deeper than it feels on the surface, right? Like
Mhm.
Charlie's in the moment interpretation of this is just he's got a long road to recovery for his leg. He might never really be able to walk again. And there's the struggle with that. But I think we can safely assume that Bowditch is talking about a lot more than that.
Mhm.
And it's not just that I'm not like, I think a shallow read of this is just he's thinking about the cancer and the hole that he's going to have to climb out of in order to recover possibly from cancer. But that's not what he's even talking about to me. To me, he's already decided he's dying of the cancer. What he's thinking about when it is this deep hole is the responsibility he has to this well that he's been guarding for his entire life and how he's going to climb out of that hole before he dies. Essentially, how is he going to make sure that this thing stays safe and hidden and protected? And he's not quite there with Charlie yet, where he thinks this is the person to take over and do the job and have that responsibility. So I think this is the attitude here is more about um, lasting long enough to figure out if this is the guy, and that's my interpretation at least.
So I really love your reading. And I'm just gonna take it. It's mine. It's my reading now.
Okay.
Because that wasn't necessarily my reading. I took it pretty literally. I mean, in fact, I took it so literally that I thought it came off as kind of dark. Knowing that he doesn't recover, right? he if we take the whole as just like he's horribly injured and he has cancer, no, he does not climb out of the hole. He dies
Yeah,
before he can climb out of the hole, which
true.
is sad. I mean, sad in a very like realistic way, because it's like, well, sort of every person who lives long enough by definition lives long enough to deteriorate, and then they don't climb out of whatever that final hole is, and it's very sad.
Yeah,
um um Sad in a very again human and relatable way. Not in a maudlin way. I mean, I feel like that's one of the great parts about this book is how just human and not kind of melodramatic it is about a lot of this, the business of being injured and being invalid and being cared for and dying and all these things. It's very like practical about these things.
yeah.
And I
Mhm.
appreciated that. um and also, so to take the light side of it, like I kind of talked about the dark side of it for a second there. The light side of it is like, well, Bowditch, he does spend the last months of his life with this kid who he's really fond of, taking care of him and getting to spend time with his dog that he loves. So he's definitely in a lot of pain, but there's a silver lining. There's a bright side to things. So I don't know, that's the more literal interpretation. I really like what you said on the metaphorical level, that yes, he's in pain. He knows he's going to die, but what's really bothering him is who's going to be the caretaker of this supernatural realm. And I think we're going to return to the word caretaker a bit, because I was
Mhm.
thinking about like how Charlie is described as like a caretaker a few times,
Mhm.
specifically Bowditch's caretaker. But it's like, well, I think he's going to just end up being the caretaker of this portal, of this house,
Yeah,
of this land.
yeah, and of that responsibility. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I like your literal interpretation too. I like that, especially because it does seem dark at first, but then the positive side is if you're gonna going spending the last few days, like you just look at how different his life, the last few months of his life would have been if he had had a heart attack before meeting Charlie, right? Like
Right.
it's like he did get this kid. He got this friend at the very end there.
Mhm.
And so yeah, I see the brightness in that for sure.
Yeah.
So our chapter ends with Charlie having a conversation with his dad. And Matt, there's nothing eventful here from the plot perspective, but I really want to focus on how much I really like this continuing father son dynamic between George and Charlie. Like I love this part here especially. I was looking forward to you going to college. Now, not so much. This house is going to feel empty without you. I'm just a quarter mile up the street, Dad, but there was a lump in my throat. I know, I know. Go on and get out of here, Chip. Do your job. He swallowed. Something clicked in his throat. And do it well. So, like, really, really wonderful dynamic, really lovely relationship between father and son here. But I like the thing that jumped out at me here and has so far in this book is this is something to me that feels so specific to modern King. Like the father son dynamic, if you look back at a lot of the books we've read, is a very, very complicated one. Is
Mhm.
a very conflict driven one. Is there aren't a lot of good dads in Stephen King's universe, at least not biological fathers, right? There's good father figures. And that is another thing that strikes me really weird, not weird, but specific to this book, because I think there's a version of this story where it is Charlie's father that dies in a freak accident, not Charlie's mother. And then Bowditch becomes a very natural father figure for him to plug in this missing part in his life. But I think it matters that that's not what Charlie's missing in his life, right? He has a father figure that he loves. Now that he has a complicated past, and part of Bowditch is certainly because of Charlie's complex relationship with his father, but it's just very specific to me of like this is a much older man, who, as we said last week, is writing from the perspective of the father, not the son, and so crafts the relationship as the type of relationship that he has had with his children for the past 40 something years, rather than the relationship with a father figure that so defined his younger years, which is him not having one. and I just continue to be kind of in awe about some of this stuff.
I love that. I think we can all relate to at least one side of this dynamic, right? And
I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In some form, in some way. Yeah. I love everything you just said there. I got nothing to add really.
All right, Matt. Chapter 7. First night. Now you know Jack. A simple woodcutter. Therapy. My father's visit. Lynn Parza. Mr. Bowditch makes a promise. I know we talked about this last week. I just want to. I love these. I love these so much because you turn the page, you read these, and you're like, huh?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I mean, it makes it actually more propulsive to read because you're genuinely like, oh, I can't wait to find out what the heck that means.
I also want to say, as a person who has to put together the script each week and hit the main events of each chapter, it's a really nice like skeleton of the main events of the chapter for me.
That's great. That's funny.
So our chapter begins with the first night. See what I did there? Charlie spends in the Bowditch house. I love, Matt, the conversation about the old TV, which, you know, we convinced ourselves last week might be magical, but upon reflection is probably just a very old TV, and Bowditch just like really likes old things because Bowditch is old. He's very, very old, actually, older than we thought he was, actually.
Yeah, and he's rich enough that he can afford to keep doing things the way he likes them, even if it's objectively absurd to do so.
Yeah, buying tubes for your TV from the one manufacturer that still has them.
Right,
Ridiculous.
Which he orders by mail. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that part. Wait, you don't have the internet. How do you get things?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So Charlie once again thinks of Jack and the Beanstalk here. And Matt, I had to read this part. I found out that the Giants' famous chant, fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman, was cribbed from King Lear, where a character named Edgar says, Child Roland to the Dark Tower came. His word was still fi, fo, and fum. I smell the blood of a British man. And something else I don't remember from any animated cartoon or little golden book. The giant's sleeping chamber is littered with the bones of children. The giant's name gave me a chill, deep and premonitory. Gomgog. Gomgagog? Gogmagog. Gogmagog. Yeah, I can do that. But what?
I learned a lot today, Scott. Learned some things after Googling some of these things because I didn't know these things. Maybe it's fine. Everybody learns some things at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's a little embarrassing that I was walking around thinking that I knew a lot about the Dark Tower while not knowing the following, which is that the line "Child Roland to the Dark Tower came" was originally in King Lear. The line in King Lear is not a reference to some older thing. It's just that's in the King Lear. Mm-hmm. And then the poem, the 1852 poem by Robert Browning is a reference to the King Lear line.
Yeah.
I don't know how I missed this. Maybe you told me this at some point and I just forgot it. That's entirely possible.
I don't think so. I think the most I might have told you is that it's a reference to a Shakespeare play. And that's it.
And maybe I had the order of events out of, somehow messed up, even though it's kind of hard to be older than Shakespeare, honestly. But then there's another thing I learned separate from this, which is that like there is a fairy tale called Child Roland, which is spelled a little bit differently. It's child is still spelled goofy, but Roland is spelled with a W, ROWLAND. And this is a fairy tale popularized in the 1890s, though probably older than that, about like a boy, a 11-year-old boy who's it doesn't say he's 11, but roughly that age, whose sister disappears into the land of fairy because she goes around the church counterclockwise, I guess, or whatever, the wrong way, the way you're not supposed to. The way you're not supposed to go around a church. We all know about this, right? And disappears into the land of fairy, and then his two brothers try to go save his sister, but they can't do it, and then the boy has to do it, and it's actually like quite shockingly violent. It's kind of funny. He saves his sister, obviously, because it's a fairy tale.
But this spoilers.
Yeah, sorry, but this fairy tale has little, if anything, to do with Browning's poem. So I just kind of thought this was kind of interesting that we have ourselves a fairy tale, which is called Childe Roland, which I didn't know anything about, which is relevant to this book, and then a reference in this book to the King Lear Childe Roland to the Dark Tower came, and then of course
Hmm.
the not even worth belaboring the point Dark Tower of it all.
Yeah.
So just wanted to dump all that here as we're talking about this because it, I think King definitely knows everything I just said.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. I actually
Yeah.
kind of can't believe he didn't make the King Lear reference specific in the Dark Tower, and perhaps he did, and we just both just whistled on past it and didn't even
Mhm.
notice. But it's just it shocks me that he didn't make that direct. The thing I didn't know was that Fee Fi Fo Fum was from that same line. Like I
Uh-huh.
knew I've read King Lear once ages ago, and I remember like objectively that there's a line that Browning used for the poem, but I didn't know that these two lines circumvented with each other in this specific kind of way, where the character of Edgar is just like trying to sell that he's insane by just saying nonsense things, and these are the nonsense things he's saying. It's wild. It's wild.
I mean, it's particularly wild that he says a nonsense line that is then taken up as the name of a poem, which is then taken
Mhm.
up as the premise of a fantasy epic. Like that's such a fascinating sort of line of heritage.
It's delightful. I love
Yeah.
it. So he happens to bring Gog Magog up to Howard, who mentions Gog and Magog and the story of Revelation. Matt, we could probably spend like an hour talking about this, but it's all really confusing, and I don't fully understand it because when you look into it, it's like at one point it was Gog from Magog, and then at some point in translations it just became Gog and Magog as two separate peoples instead of one being the land that the other is from. It doesn't matter. The point is that I really think the point here is that we're supposed to be getting this idea and this feeling and this tone management that, hey, this is a book about fairy tales, but these are dark. These are uncomfortable. You should be thinking about Jack and the Beanstalk and the Giant as not this fun little tale of this boy stealing a golden goose, but actually a tale of a horrible, monstrous giant who was late, who was featured heavily in the Book of Revelation.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right. Like we're not going to we're not having a fun adventure. We're going to a dark and scary place. I mean, it reminds me a lot of Midworld and Territories, honestly, where it's like
Mm-hmm.
this is actually a deadly, dangerous place. And by the way, obviously Gog is the United States and Magog is the USSR. If that helps you decode the Bible.
Bible unlocked. Thank you, Matt. We
Yeah.
all understand it now.
Yeah.
Those damn communist magogs.
Yeah, that's why the world ended in 1973.
Also, this is when Howard describes himself as but a simple huntsman, um, which I continue to just love. Like, yeah, I guess we should just state it outright that like the huntsman in fairy tales is like one of the most common recurring characters, right? Like the huntsman is a character in Red Riding Hood, I believe, in Snow White, and like this is a very common fairy tale trope to have a woodcutter or a huntsman
Mhm.
playing a prominent role in your story.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. It's cute here because Howard is sort of winking to himself and sort of at us a little bit, and
Yeah.
Charlie doesn't really get it yet, but we kind of
Mhm.
get it, and then we can retrospectively get it. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Another wonderful scene that I wanted to talk about briefly with you, Matt, is when Charlie's dad comes to visit Bowditch, and the two of them actually hit it off famously. They really like each other. It's a really great, positive visit. And I just love, like, the principle of this idea of this curmudgeonly old man who doesn't really like people actually, like, trying really hard to impress this guy, to impress Charlie's father, because he likes his son so much. And he wants his son's father to be at ease about this relationship, and so he's more extroverted, he's more outgoing, he's trying harder than he would have otherwise. It's really great. I love it.
Yeah, it's delightful. I think maybe one thing I was thinking about afterward is how from Bowditch's later story, maybe he wasn't always, curmudgeonly, but perhaps a loner. That is kind of the nature of the job. And that is, I think, somewhat how he described himself is somebody who is at least comfortable being alone, but maybe it's only been in his extreme old age and after, everyone he knew and loved being dead for 50 years that he became as kind of embittered as he appears now. And um, so I don't know. I guess I just mentioned this to say, I knew he had it in him.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not like he has like severe personality disorders. He's just very old and set in his ways and hasn't
Yeah.
really had a lot of conversations recently.
Yeah, for sure. I like kind of the reveal that perhaps he is an introverted loner type person, but we perceive him as agoraphobic from the way he's described early in the book, and that is perhaps just not true because yes,
Mhm.
he wasn't leaving his property very often, but he was certainly leaving. Right, he was
Mhm.
for years and years and years traveling to this other world and going on countless adventures and things we might never know fully about.
And when he was a young man, he traveled far and wide. Like
Yeah,
that's
this has
kind of one
been
of the
his.
yeah
Yeah, I mean the homebody part of it is a relatively new development in his long life.
yeah
Yeah. I also wanted to just point out this part and kind of talk to you about it here. That goddamn bridge should have been paved over right away, Mr. Bowditch said. Her death could have been avoided. I'm surprised you didn't sue the city. He was too busy drinking to think of things like that, I thought. My old resentments were mostly gone, but not entirely. Fright and loss leave a residue. Huh. I love this whole interaction so much.
yeah.
I don't have anything specific to say about it. Perhaps you do, but I just wanted to make sure we pulled it.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you pulled it. I felt like it was an interesting moment, um, and I had an interesting reaction to it because part of it was like feeling a little bit like what Bowditch said was, a sort of mild, forgivable faux pas.
Hmm.
I wouldn't have said personally, I'm surprised you didn't sue the city because it's kind of an implied criticism, you know,
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
mildly. But like setting that aside, Charlie's reaction was the part that most interested me, where it's like a very immediate, very dark place that he goes to
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of what is otherwise like this really kind of delightful scene where it's this meeting we've been looking forward to. Maybe we've been even a little apprehensive about this meeting, but it goes swimmingly. They get along super well. Couldn't be better. And then, as soon as this mention of his mother's death is brought up, and it just immediately sends Charlie into this place where he's thinking about the alcoholism. The old resentments were mostly gone, but not entirely.
Mm-hmm.
And he's clearly still affected by this. Not just the loss. I think this is one thing we didn't say explicitly. Is like what a horrible experience to go through to be a child who loses one parent and then is essentially left unable to fully process that grief because their other parent becomes completely unreliable due to
Yeah.
their own grief, which is, I'm sure, a story that happens over and over because it's just a horrible situation. Um, and as I think we did say last week, like Charlie therefore has to grow up and sort of become the man of the house, which is a horrible burden for a child. Uh, Clearly, he is not all right. Like the kid's not all right. He's super like entangled with the fact that he's so moral and conscientious is the fact that he's kind of screwed up. He's kind of dark. He's kind of messed up inside. And we see that leaking through in moments like this. So that's why I'm glad you pulled this out.
I love that. I love that you said that because I think you're absolutely right here. It's very easy to look at him as this morally upstanding, does the right thing, good head on his shoulders kid, and just see that and only that when obviously you're absolutely right. There's a whole lot of trauma underneath Charlie and everything he's gone through, and it's definitely not gone. That's great. Yeah, I think it's important to not lose sight of that for sure.
And maybe this is some projection, but I feel even like his dad is proud of him, but I think his dad also, like the way his dad speaks to him, knows on some level that like the reason you are this way is that I fucked up.
Yeah. Hmm.
And so he's proud, but he knows that it's sort of despite his parenting.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot like that paragraph I read a little bit earlier. at the end of the last chapter was like, you know, the complicated nature of knowing that your son is on the cusp of adulthood, ready to grow up, and perhaps more ready than anyone else because of you, and then also like the years you lost in your drunken stupor. Like he's about to leave home, you're about to lose him as not as your son, but like the relationship and dynamic changes when you move away from home and you move into adulthood, and he's lost the childhood he had with his son as part of his fault, and it's a lot of complicated stuff happening here. And it's not like no one says it outright, but you can tell, I think, the way the characters act around each other, the way they talk. I think you're absolutely right, picking up on something we talked about with George last week, where we talked about maybe he was afraid of punishing his kid. Maybe that wasn't exactly right, but it's just every conversation and every compliment and every concern is laced with this fact of like, I was a complete fuck up and almost destroyed everything for us. Yeah, it has to
Yeah, and I think it's gonna continue to come into play in the story
for sure. Yeah. All right, so from here, Charlie looks up one of Howard's medications and basically learns that the man has prostate cancer. This is kind of one of the big reveals. This is something you got right last week, Matt, that I got wrong, and you got right when you said he was complaining about doctors and their bad news. I was thinking that was some long past resentment from his past, that he doesn't like doctors. You said it was something more current. I think you even said cancer. I think at one point you said, "Oh, he's probably got cancer." And you were just 100% right here.
Yep, 100%. No, I think what happened is I actually backpedaled a little bit, but we're just going to pretend that I didn't do that.
You have to commit fully and recklessly.
Yeah, I really should know better at this point.
Yeah. But when he's trying to explain to Charlie why he's not really trying to fight the cancer, I mean, he's taking medication that could help stall or shrink the tumor, but he's not doing like a full out suite of cancer treatment. He explains it thusly. He says, "There's something else, young man, something a person your age can't understand. I've almost had enough. Not quite, but almost. Life gets old. You might not believe that. I know I didn't he paused, when I was young. But it's true." He lay back, groped for radar, found her, stroked her. "But I didn't want to leave her alone, right? We're pals, she and I. And now I don't have to worry. If she outlives me, you'll take her. Wouldn't you?" So I love this. I love this so much. I think, and this is a fun conversation because this is a conversation that I think you and I somewhat split in our appreciation for certain ideas and philosophies and things like this. I kind of, so here's what I think. I want to get a point in my life eventually where as I approach death, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Like, I'm not saying if I get sick in my old age, I'm not going to like fight my illness. I'm certainly going to do that, but I would feel much more content and less terrified of death if I got to this point where like, yeah, okay, that was good. I'm good. I'm happy. It was a good run. I had a good one. Let's move on now. I hope I can get to that place one day.
Yeah, I think we've probably said basically this before, but like, yeah, yes. If you have to die, then you might as well die well. I agree with that. The dream is to not have to die. But
just dream the impossible dream, Matt. Just keep going for it.
Well, so look, I think in context of this story, that's interesting because he knows that there's a magical sundial.
Yeah.
And while his leg is shattered and he couldn't get to the sundial if he wanted to, he did have like 50 years probably when he could have at any point gone and like reset his age, presumably. I mean, maybe it's possible we're missing some plot elements that would have kept that from being the case, but let's just assume for the sake of argument that was a possibility and that he didn't, and that he chose not to, right? Mm-hmm. And that here, even at his last extremity toward the end of the book, or toward the end of this week's reading, rather, he insists that this be done for Radar, but not for himself, right? So he I think just earnestly is like, yeah, even though I have this ability, I'm not gonna do it.
He says specifically that there's a price to be paid
Mm,
for it, and
mm,
we don't know what that price is yet. I assume it will be pretty steep, but I think this is one thing I do like consistency wise in King's universe is that when there is things like this, when there is powers that artificially prolong lives, there is always a price for them. None of this is ever free. It always costs something, and I look forward to see what this costs and why he felt that it wasn't worth it anymore.
yeah.
Um, I do like your idea of like one of the greatest ironies of him breaking his leg is that if even if he was like, like I'm just gonna clean my gutters and then I'm gonna go down the well and get young again.
Yep. This is just one last errand before eternal life. No, that's great. Just
But
one
yeah.
more comment on this. I know it must have caused King physical pain not to say, I feel like butter scraped over too much bread. Um,
Yeah, I mean
and
it is true. Like the our character is feeling tired and old and prolonged in much the same way that the ring did so for Bilbo. So I think you're right there.
yeah, I don't think that's like unintentional.
No, no. So I love the way this chapter ends, where they're talking about what they're going to do when Charlie has to go back to school and can no longer stay the night, and also can no longer give Howard his pain pills in the middle of the night and in the middle of the afternoon. And I love this moment where Howard's just basically, just give them to me. I promise I won't take them. I will not take them. And if I do, if you catch me do it once, then you will just take them away and I'll just do with ibuprofen. And the chapter ends with, he never cheated. Not once. And I love that. I love that as this statement of who Howard Bowditch ultimately is. He's addicted to this pain medication. He's on Oxycontin. It's a very, very dangerous, very addictive drug. Stephen King knows personally because that is the drug that he became addicted to when he shattered his leg, which led me down, Matt, a whole rabbit hole. And I want to briefly talk to you about this. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I was thinking about these three characters because you have George, the recovering alcoholic. You have Howard, the elderly old man who horribly injures himself and has to nurse himself back to recovery. And then you have Charlie, the young kid entering life, and as we see later, a storyteller. And I'm like, I know we all like to do the Stephen King audience insert thing, but this is one of those ones where I feel is almost intentionally textual, that
Mhm.
Stephen King is writing each of these characters from a perspective of his life. That Charlie is king as a young man just starting out in the world. George George Reed is king middle aged. He's got children, he's got responsibilities, and he has this addiction that he's perhaps finally gotten under control for the first time in his life. And then Howard is king at the age he is right now, an old man, aches and pains and thinking about life and the future and his legacy and what he's going to pass on and what he isn't. And it just feels very perfect to me. And this is one of those things where I fully admit that part of the reason I'm doing this is because it ties our whole podcast project in a very neat little bow. If this
Mhm.
is the book reflecting on the entire life of Stephen King, to also be the last book we're doing. But I don't know. I feel like there's something here.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't remember if we talked about the idea of Bowditch specifically being, uh, uh, you know, riffing on King's accident. I don't remember that we did that, but I definitely was thinking about that a lot. Where it's like very specifically, he shatters his leg. He has to have a lot of the similar recovery elements. He takes the pills, and then like you said, yeah. I mean, the only one of those that I sort of want to be expanded upon is young Charlie as teenage Stephen King.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I disbelieve you or that I don't think there's something here. I'm more saying I want to see that elaborated upon because I really do like this as like a structural conceit for the story or a character conceit is like this writer exploring his own personal struggles at different ages and what he learned from those, and what he wished he had learned from those, maybe. I mean, right off the bat, you already mentioned the idea that Charlie comes from, a broken home, and not in the same way that King comes from a broken home, but they're both, people who were basically raised by one parent. Not quite the same. There's dissimilarities too, but there's also definite similarities.
Yeah. Yeah, I will admit the Charlie portion of this metaphor is the least explored and thinnest one for me. But I want to keep it in mind and see if this goes anywhere, because I do like it.
Yeah.
All right, chapter 8, Water Under the Bridge, The Fascination of Gold, An Old Dog, Newspaper News, and Arrest. The chapter starts with Bowditch having warmed up to Charlie considerably at this point, trying to figure out why the kid is so devoted to him. Atoning is what he reasons, but for what? And this is the part, Matt, where once again I was like, oh, maybe Matt has a point here, because as he questions what Charlie could possibly be atoning for, he thinks once again back to the time with his old friend Bertie and his fake bomb threat that he called in. And like, man, on the one hand, I totally get it. It's not a good thing to do. Kids, if you're listening out there, don't call in fake bomb threats. Very, very bad thing to do, especially at a school, especially in this day and age we live in. On the other hand, Matt, nobody died.
Yeah.
Nobody was hurt. People got scared. And that's not good, but come on, Chuck, get over it.
Right. I mean, it's almost as though King chose a crime that is simultaneously very serious, but also really a victimless crime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, no, not literally, but like you said, no one really got hurt.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that would make this make sense to me is if like a panic ensued and people got hurt out of the panic. But it doesn't seem like that's the case.
Mm-hmm. No, I think he just feels bad that he scared a bunch of kids. Like that's the kind of thing that would make him feel bad, because he's this good guy, who this good 6'4", 17-year-old, which I don't remember if we mentioned that yet. By the way,
yeah, he is. There you go. That's how he's Stephen King, Matt. He's once again 6'4".
And, I'm pretty sure in my entire high school, there was maybe one kid that tall. But, whatever. It's fine.
People are getting taller, Matt. People are getting taller, and it's freaking me out. I'm like 6'2", and so I'm very used to being, in most situations, the tallest person in the room. And I just increasingly have been seeing, like, teenage boys, like 17, maybe 18, like out, because I live near a college. I should say this. I live relatively close to a college. And they'll just like be at Target, and these two like 18-year-old looking guys walk by me, and they're like, I'm looking up at them. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here?
This is not acceptable.
Yeah. It's happening. It's happening. We're all going to be old and short one day.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I'm going under for the Space Marine treatment. They're going to cut my body apart and rebuild me.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
Let me know how that works out.
But yeah, I definitely I can't move past this part of the conversation without remembering that he's 6'4" for sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I appreciate you bringing that up again.
Yeah, but he's to get back on topic, he's like something suspicious. I think again, we're setting something up. We're setting something up with this character, but I don't think it's that he is secretly a monster anymore.
Yeah, I just don't know what it possibly could be. Really looking forward to seeing how this pays off.
Yeah.
Then we get this line, Matt. In the end, it wasn't cancer that got him. It was a heart attack. Except not really. It was the goddamn shed. And that's when you're like, no.
Although you make the wrong assumption.
Yeah.
You think the shed will, he will literally die because of the shed, and it's a little bit more abstract than that.
Yeah. My only hope, Matt, my only hope that I'm running on right now is that because King has not done this specific thing he does about Radar or George Reed yet, that both of those, that they're safe, that the dog and Charlie's father are safe. Because if they weren't safe, we'd get this kind of, and little did Radar know that he was gonna die.
Yep. Exactly like that. Yep.
Yeah, that's how he would rate it. Yeah. So we haven't gotten that. So we're good. Radar's gonna live.
Yeah, I believe you.
So I do a quick question for you here. As part of this conversation, Howard is talking to Charlie about the gold, and he mentions this idea that, like, I think they're talking about Heinrich and the threat he could possibly pose, and he's basically like, Charlie, what do you think? What do you think I would do if, like, someone came knocking on the door and busting into the house and holding up a weapon and demand I give him the gold or else? And Charlie's like, I guess you'd probably, like, just give him the gold. And Howard's like, yeah, exactly. That's what I would do. I would just give him the gold. I guess I just wanted to know what your thoughts on this conversation and what we could possibly be doing here are, because I wasn't sure what to make of it myself.
It I didn't really know what to make of it, to the extent that when I read this in the script, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that, which is unusual, because I just didn't know what to do with it. It's almost like the closest, the simplest thing, I guess, is like he kind of doesn't feel like it's his, or like he deserves it. He doesn't feel like he deserves to have the gold.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's because he knows, and I think we learn that exactly why later, right? He does see on certain level his cutting and running and stealing of the gold as one of his great failures in life. So I think that lines up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if it's a choice between the gold and his life, he would just give up the gold, because he doesn't care. He doesn't care. Like, it's not like he's miserly in the sense that he's like hoarding the gold for his own purposes. It's just the gold is like a practical way of keeping the well defended, really.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I got nothing real wise to say here.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I just wanted to make sure we called it out and see if you had any further thoughts on it. So
No.
one of the things we have to talk about here, Matt, is something that I've been kind of avoiding, if you've been paying attention, is Radar, because one of the beats throughout these chapters is Radar is not doing too well. She's getting older and older, and the medication at first was starting to help, and she was kind of being more spry and jumping around a little bit more, but that's not working anymore, and she's having trouble getting up steps. She's not eating, and I don't like it. I don't like this at all. And what we're doing here is essentially like doing this clever setup to this final moment at the end of chapter 10, that there exists in the well of the world a fountain of youth of sorts, that will, I think, end up being the driving thing that gets Charlie into this other world, is to heal her. But we're just building to this slowly and painfully over time, and then, like, there's the moment where, like, I think Bowditch says, start giving her 2 of the pills. That'll work for a little while. And it's like, yeah, but we're on borrowed time here, essentially.
Yeah. Another idea here is, we've established Charlie as this character who suffered this terrible loss. And so he's the kind of person who I think would be unusually motivated to save the life of his animal companion if he has the ability to, because he has that particular trauma. That just seems like a thing that was set up.
I think you're right.
But I mean, along, like, emotions wise, yeah, this is just overall a pretty sad week of reading. A lot of losses, a lot of watching people who we like suffer. But good stuff, good writing, good story.
Yeah. So one other thing I wanted to talk to you about here as we get to the end of the chapter is we see summer kind of start to slowly transition into the fall, and we see that Charlie is once again abandoning things outside of his responsibilities to Bowditch here. We see he has decided he won't be playing football either. So he quit baseball, he quit football, And we talked about this a little bit last week with the baseball thing. And look, like the thing I want to make clear here is like, look, these are sports, right? Ultimately, they're sports. They don't matter. I also think like a lot of the extracurricular activities, including the sports, was a line to eventually being able to afford college, which is a problem that solves itself by the end of this week's reading. But I just have this really interesting feeling here. Like we get this specific note that the football team goes 0-3, and Charlie is good enough that everyone on the team blames him for not being on there. And so his old teammates, his old friends stop talking to him. And part of me wondered, are we doing like a thing here where Charlie is starting to isolate himself more and more? He's detaching from all relationships outside of this specific one, all friendships. Is he essentially becoming Bowditch? And I wasn't sure what you thought of that.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I kind of have a theory here. Maybe theory is too pompous a word for it, but an expectation is building that maybe Charlie will simply not end up going to college at all, because he feels that he has to be the caretaker of this old house, of the shed. And like, and you can even see how it would work for him, that he decides, maybe because he is told, maybe because he just intuits it, that this is what God wanted of him. God, yeah, God wanted you to save the old man, but he wanted you to save the old man and take care of the old man, so that the old man would trust you and give you the the keys to the fortress, metaphorically speaking. So now you're the caretaker, and that is actually your duty now. You can already see that happening, right? So and then this would also provide a source of conflict with his father, because his father wouldn't understand. We planned on you going to college, and he's like, I'm my own man now. I'm gonna stay up in the psycho house alone. That's what I want. And like there's a lot of it just immediately seems like a dramatic situation. Like as soon as that idea occurred to me,
Yeah.
based on this idea of like him becoming Bowditch, him taking Bowditch's place, I was like, yeah, there's a lot there.
Are we going to be happy about that? Like,
I don't think
if
so.
that's yeah, that seems sad to me.
I think it seems sad. I think that's like a source of great tragedy and loss here, is what's going to happen to this kid. Um, where is he going to end up, and what position is he writing this from? Is he writing this from the position of a middle-aged man who's still locked up in this house, looking out of those top windows of the psycho house, as he writes this manuscript, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I hope not, but we'll see.
Oh, I hope not. All right, chapter 9, the thing in the shed, a dangerous place, 911, the wallet, a good conversation. Anytime you see like the shed in the title of one of these chapters, you get a little excited here, because you're like, oh, here we go. I think in chapter 10 it's inside the shed, and you're like, yes, finally, we're doing it.
Yeah.
So I think chapter 9 though is really the moment that things start to really escalate in our story. First, Radar suddenly begins to lose her mind as another noise comes from the shed. This one is loud and clearly trying to get out. The book describes this as a weird mewling sound, sort of like a cat, but higher in pitch. It was like listening to chalk scream on a blackboard, and my arms hucked up in goose flesh.
Yeah,
Oh,
this is
man.
creepy as hell.
Yeah. Did cockroaches make noises? I guess they're like monster fairy cockroaches, but
I think there are hissing cockroaches,
they
right?
do. Yeah, there are hissing ones. Yeah,
And if it was bigger, maybe that sound would be, louder.
sure, fair. I'll take it. Bowditch says he needs to take care of this problem, and he rushes upstairs to get his gun. And Matt, oh my god, I I love this so much. When he came back downstairs, he was carrying the gun I'd asked him to bring downstairs, but not just the gun. It was a leather holster, and the holster was attached to a leather belt studded with silver conchos. It looked like something out of Gunfight at the OK Corral. He cinched it at his waist so the holster revolver rested just below his right hip. rawhide strings tied down, dangled against his madras shorts. It should have looked ridiculous. He should have looked ridiculous, but it didn't, and he didn't. And I'm just like, fuck yeah, he's a gunslinger. Let's go, Bowditch.
Hell yeah. I mean, I was expecting for a minute here that we were going to get a reveal that he is, you know, a literal gunslinger of Gilead. That's not what we did. But I mean, we're clearly making the association here.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, like, this is one of those things, we talk so often about like the Easter eggs that King leaves, the interconnected world of the Stephen King universe and the stories and how they play off of each other, and how often my argument is and was and will always be that so much of the stuff is more just like fun Easter eggy stuff. But then there's moments like this where like Stephen King knows that a lot of people reading this book are very well versed in gunslingers and the Dark Tower and these things, and he's playing to them with this. Like, he's very specifically playing to them. Our ears perk up whenever someone puts a gun belt on them, and when it looks like it fits them, it looks like it belongs with them. So I think he's doing this all intentionally.
Yeah, I agree.
So Bowditch saunters up to the shed, opens it, goes inside, and after a few minutes fires twice, killing whatever it is that's in there. We unfortunately don't get to see what that is, which drove me crazy. He returns to Radar and Charlie, but he's clearly hurting, and per Charlie, this event is what sends him hurtling towards that heart attack that will kill him. Right? This is it. This is the moment. This is the beginning of the end, as it were.
Yeah, I agree. This is the point of acceleration. Yeah.
I just loved this quote as well. Bowditch asks for a little thimble of whiskey to just kind of help him along and recover from the events here, and he helps him. He does help him, but we get this moment. Whiskey doesn't smell the same as gin, yet it does. All alcohol smells the same to me, of sadness and loss. It's like, oh
yeah, Charlie, sorry man, you're not doing okay.
No.
I mean, the alcohol does smell terrible though.
This all culminates to a phone call that Charlie gets one day in school. It's Bowditch informing the boy that he's right this very minute having a heart attack and trying to frantically pass along important messages to him. He says that everything he will need is under the bed, the wallet, but other things too. The whole truth will be down there, and after he learns it, he can decide what he wants to do with it. Charlie calls 911 because Bowditch clearly wasn't, and starts riding his bike frantically to the house. He checks under the bed and finds the wallet and the gun and the tape recorder. But Matt, he doesn't listen to it yet. It's a whole nother chapter before he listens to and it's driving me. I'm like, press the play button. Do it.
Yeah. We need to know, Charlie. Yeah, this is definitely a point. I know it's in some sense juvenile to feel this way, but I was starting to get frustrated with the book for holding out on us when it's like, he's got the tape. Come on. Like, you're not going to, you've robbed us. Part of it, I think, also is like, okay, you've robbed us of the opportunity for these two characters to actually have this conversation, which you wanted to see them have. You wanted to see Bowditch explain this to him and have him able to ask questions. And I get why you deny him that, because if he can't ask questions, now he has to go find out the answers for himself. It's much more mysterious this way.
Yeah,
I get it, but it is frustrating.
And I mean, like, it's definitely like you can tell that King wants to set up this very specific scene. Like, he wants to have Charlie returning to the house for the first time since the funeral. The house is alone. He's empty in it. He's sad and mourning his friend. And then he gets to press the tape recorder and his whole life changed. Like, he wants this construction of this scene, like this tonal, emotional construction of the scene. And so it just doesn't make sense for him to press it right now. I totally get that. But yeah, there is a part of me that's like, come on, man. I just want to know.
Yep.
So Charlie decides he's going to go run and see Bowditch in the hospital after locking away all the things that were under the bed. And he crosses that damn bridge, Matt. And as he's halfway across that damn bridge, he gets a call from Melissa Wilcox. She informs him that Howard Bowditch is dead. He died on the way to the hospital. And we get this. I looked at the window of the Zip Mart. The sign there was the same. A heaped plate of fried chicken that was the best in the land. The tears came and the words blurred. This is just one of those things that, like, it's just brilliant writing in its simplicity. Almost is like, okay, I know I'm going to kill Bowditch. I know Charlie's going to be absolutely devastated and distraught. And how do I communicate just what this means to this boy that that has already lost his mother, that almost lost his father, and now kind of developed this relationship with this old man, is now losing him too. How do I communicate the emotional devastation that must put upon this kid in a simple but impactful way? And the answer is so obvious but perfect. I just have it happen in the same place the last bad thing happened. And I just
Mhm.
have him experience this bad news in the same moment that the last bad news was created for him. And it's just like, this is not complex, right? This is not complicated, but just like, it's perfect. It is just perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. There's a lot about this book that I could really see adapted. Like I see a lot of
Mm.
these scenes in my mind's eye. This
Yeah,
is
I
one.
agree.
I just mentioned that here because I could absolutely imagine him. I could see how this would be shot. Right.
Yeah,
Um, and it's it's storytelling through visual language, and I like that a lot.
I agree. I agree. This is really, really good stuff. So Charlie and his father find out that the driver's license in the wallet Bowditch left is just a very, very, very convincing fake, and it was created to ensure legal declaration of death in order to what else? Ensure the legal transfer of property. Well, to who? Well, Matt, Charlie, of course. This is actually like the least surprising turn of events in the story so far. That, like, the story of the mysterious old rich man who befriends a young boy and then dies and leaves the young man everything he has, including the responsibility to be a caretaker of the mysterious thing. Like, this is like a tale as old as time here,
Uh huh.
right?
It's delightful. Yeah, I think part of the reason why the story is slow, plot wise, is to sort of uh, make it so that the great expectations that Charlie receives are more more earned. That they
Mhm.
feel more earned if you really feel like he had to work for it and spend some time. Um, and then that gets us to this point of the story, and then I don't know. It all just feels more rooted this way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I wonder, like, if you step back, and this is an incredibly premature thing to do as we have so much of the book left to read, but this this idea that, you look at, if you're editing this book and you're looking at these 180 pages or so, and you're like, is there any way we can move through this stuff quicker? And then you start looking at it and you're like, I really think the answer is no, because, like, it all is so important to establishing all of the stuff. Like, I just feel like if we did Bowditch in 30 pages instead of 150, this moment now and this responsibility that Charlie feels, and the emotional impact of this death, and eventually of listening to this tape, is just lessened. It just is. And I'm not saying there's no version of the story that would work with this stuff being a fraction of the size it is, but the reason it works so well on us now is because of those all those pages that were leading into this.
Totally. Yep.
So yeah, the big news is Charlie now has like high six figures worth of property in his name, so college is not going to be a problem. He also, Matt, has like $1 million worth of gold, but I don't know. He has no one to trade it to because his one source is. How would you go about that if you were a 17-year-old kid and you had a bucket full of gold? What would you do, Matt? What would you do?
Um. Um. Well, there's a couple things that come to
Okay.
mind within the first 5 seconds of thinking about it. One of them is you find like a jeweler, like a or like someone who like a pawn shop type person, and just ask like, hey, who do you sell gold to? And then just like try to find the person who buys gold, and then just sell it to them. And I don't think they'd make a big deal out of it, especially if they'd work with pawn shops. They're probably good about not asking questions. And then another way you could do it is just like he could use his money to buy some land in the hills and then be like, hey, found some gold in the hills. Here it is. It's legitimate. Found it in the hills on my land.
I found it in the hills. I mined it, and I
I
I
processed it
forged
into
it into
pellets.
these little BBs for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And then if they ask you how, just be like, I don't know. I don't know. I just did it.
I
Do you
don't
want the
know.
gold or not?
Give me the gold.
Yeah.
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 Okay, that's fair. Yeah. Buy a house in the hills. Open a gold
Yep.
mine. Yeah, I
Yep.
like it.
And yep.
Our chapter ends with Charlie heading back into his house now, his new house, and finding that it's been broken into and ransacked. And that's kind of our cliffhanger moment of this chapter.
Ransacked by leprechauns.
Of course. Yeah. Of course. Leprechauns. All right. Chapter 10, Wreckage, Mrs. Richland, Obit Thieves, The Tale of the Tape, Inside the Shed, The Tale of the Tape continued. All right, Matt, this is it, our final chapter of the week. And finally, we get some answers. First, Charlie investigates the ransacked house and finds that the safe was indeed tampered with, but unsuccessfully. He goes and chats with the nosy neighbor, Mrs. Richland, who lets him know that one unusual person was recently in the area, a funny little man selling magazines, who, of course, had a cap with a red circle on the front. And this is like, the simplicity of this stuff is sometimes what I can't get over, because we established this character before this moment, right? We established that this character with just a random name of someone we didn't know and had no basis for, had no structural um, support around anything to do with this character, just complete non sequitur. We're like, okay, don't know what to do with that. And then we build to this moment where instead of Mrs. Richland telling us about an entirely new presence that we had nothing and no basis for, she's telling us about a character that we already kind of know. And it allows us in this moment to go, oh, it's the same guy. Even though we haven't even met that guy and don't even know what his purpose is in the story yet, we get to go, oh, it's the same guy. And it's just like, that's so effective. It's so effective. And I don't think I would have ever thought of doing it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. King knows all the tricks.
He really does.
You're right, though. It's so simple. I'm like, yeah, it's almost too simple to mention, but you're right that it's so effective that it's worth talking about.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah.
What do you think of Mrs. Richland? Because we haven't talked much about her, but she has been this constant beat throughout the book so far as like the nosy neighbor that they're kind of always trying to avoid. In that like she's always kind of clearly wanting to know more about what's going on in this house, and they seem aware of her to the point where, like, I don't know, this might be my brain working too hard here, but I wonder if we're setting something up specifically with her. That she has more to play in the story than just the nosy neighbor that lives next door. What do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either way. I mean, there's definitely some tropes that you could point to and say, yeah, she's watching over him. She's the, who was Harry Potter's neighbor, who was a witch, who was watching him, But it doesn't quite make sense though, because that would kind of be at odds with this idea that Bowditch is this loner who, he's the sole guardian and caretaker. That's kind of the vibe you get, and you feel like Bowditch would have mentioned it if he knew about it. So if she is some sort of, supernatural figure who's watching, then I don't really know what that would mean for his role in things. I kind of lean away from her being anything more than she seems, but it's certainly a possibility.
I do too, to be honest with you. I think this is just another instance of, it's as simple as it looks. She's just a nosy neighbor that is used to provide some information in much in the same way the nosy neighbor in Mr. Mercedes was, and that's all there is to her. So, but
yes,
but yeah, I just, being transparent, the thought had crossed my mind a couple times.
Yeah, the nosy neighbor in Mr. Mercedes, the book, not the show.
Yeah. The nosy neighbor in the show wanted to bang. She didn't want the nose.
Yep.
Charlie calls the police and they come and look out, but they're less than helpful. and it's pretty clear right away that this mystery will only be solved via Charlie and the tape recorder, right? Like I think they call them obit thieves, is what they call them, is the people that read about obituaries and know when the funeral is going to be, and then break into the house while they're away. Like I've never heard of this, but like as soon as they talked about it in the book, I was like, oh yes, surely that is an actual thing that some people have done in the past. But I've never actually heard of it.
Yeah, I haven't either. I love the drive-by characterization of these cops, by the way. Just like a few sentences of description, really, and yet they're very vivid. It's
Yeah,
great stuff.
they suck. They suck. And
Yep.
they don't talk to Charlie. They only talk to Charlie's dad
Yep.
about any
They're
of it.
bad at their job.
Yeah, yeah. So finally, Matt, Charlie presses play on the tape recorder, and we get to learn all about Mr. Bowditch and his past. We learn that he's not the grandson of Adrian Howard Bowditch, but is old Adrian AB. He's old AB himself. He's about 120 years old. His life is prolonged by a certain sundial in a magical realm accessed via the shed. But before he explains what's down there, Tape Bowditch asks Charlie to stop it and go check out to see what's in the shed himself. And Charlie does, of course, but not before being armed. So, Matt, before we get into that, what is your initial reaction to this reveal of the elderly Bowditch and his age?
Well, I just thought it was mildly funny that his incredible supernatural age is 120, and not like 300 or something. It just seems like it's just kind of unusual that if you're going to have a super old character, it's like, oh, I mean, people can theoretically live to be that old, so it's not that old anyway. That's
it's pretty fucking old. Yes, it's technically possible for a person to reach that age, but that's still pretty fucking old.
Right. Although it turns out more and more often that the people who claim to be that old are actually just like committing pension fraud, and they're not actually that old.
Wait, is that true?
There's like an incredibly good correlation between super old people and areas where records don't go back very far. Meaning, like, yeah, you can just say that you're older than you are and then get pension earlier.
That makes me really sad.
Yeah, so I think most of the oldest people of all time are liars, is the truth.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so we don't actually know. I mean, I think you can get a good sense of how old people can be by looking at the normal distribution and throwing out the extreme tail. Anyway, that's or you have a magical sundial. That's also fine.
Sure. Yeah.
So maybe you knew this, maybe not, but probably most people don't know this, is the audiobook has a delightful surprise for us when we hit play on Bowditch's tape, which is that you hear the crackly sound of an old-fashioned audio cassette tape, and a voice starts speaking, and it's not the audiobook reader's voice, and it's a totally different man. It's a man who's done audiobook readings before. An old man. So,
dear Lord, just say who it is.
It's Stephen King. Stephen King does the Bowditch tape. And it's funny because if you look at the audiobook, it says narrated by audiobook reader name and Stephen King. So it's not like they're really hiding it. But anyway.
Those damn credits. You have to do stuff like that and it just ruins everything. Yeah. No, I did not know that until you told me that. I think that's really cool. I feel like I remember vaguely someone sending an email or a message saying like, oh, like I can't wait till Matt discovers the surprise in chapter yada yada. Like he'll definitely know when he sees it. And I just had I was like, I just filed that away under don't know what to do with that. Sure, whatever. That's fun though. That's really cool. This really helps support my Bowditch is Stephen King, is current year Stephen King theory. So I like that.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with you. It does feel like the funny thing is that King is definitely doing a bit of a character. Like it's clearly his voice. I recognize his voice immediately from the other audiobooks of his that I've listened to and his interviews and whatever. But like he's doing a different voice. He's doing his Bowditch voice. But the funny thing is his Bowditch voice is nothing like the audiobook reader's normal Bowditch voice. So you just have to kind of suspend your disbelief for a second because it is fun enough that you're just like, this is cool. I like this.
Yeah, I mean that's fun. I wonder if it kind of gets in the way of like sometimes these fun gimmicky things just get in the way of what the story is doing, which is this is a pretty pivotal moment in the story, and like I don't know, I haven't listened to it, so I don't know. I'm sure it's fun, but like wouldn't it have been just better to be consistent with the characterization of the character in the story? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I'd be lying if I said that it didn't slightly deflate the pathos of this moment we've been building towards, but I do think there's some mitigating, like, but this is the author stepping in from outside of the curtain,
Sure.
and that makes it feel a little special, but in a different way, I guess.
Yeah, okay. Fair. Fair. All right, so Charlie goes into the shed. He's armed with the gun. He's turning into a gunslinger himself, and inside, what does he find? It's a it's a dead. It's just a dead. It's a dead bug. It's a dead cockroach, but like a big one, like the
A big
size of
one.
a cat.
I thought it was going to be a goblin.
It's a cockroach.
Just a cockroach.
Just a bug.
It's funny that I don't have a naturally visceral reaction to the idea of a giant cockroach, but at the same time, like, if I really put myself in the headspace of just like I imagine, I look over there in the corner and there's a cockroach the size of a cat, I would definitely flip my shit entirely. So
Yeah.
it's
No.
just like sometimes our imagination needs a little extra like focus to make us properly freaked out by something. It's just a weird fact about my brain that I noticed.
Yeah, I'm looking in the corner of my room right now and imagining what I would do if out of the corner of my eye as I'm talking to you on this computer screen, I see movement and it's a bug, and not just a bug, but a bug the size of a cat.
Right.
I would sufficiently lose my shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would not particularly afraid of bugs, not like I don't like cockroaches because nobody likes cockroaches, but I'm not like particularly like grossed out by them. But yeah, just
Yeah.
one that one that ugh, that big. Nah,
Yeah.
uh.
Right. Do you ever see the pictures or the videos of those solifuge bugs that live in the desert in like the Middle East?
Is this another fucking thing that in the middle of the show you're gonna make me Google and it's gonna just ruin everything?
I hope so. So just look up solifuge. It's yeah, the funny thing is I don't think they're dangerous at all, but they're so ugly and horrifying that if you like came across one, you would want to stamp it to death.
God damn it, Matt. God damn it.
But there's like really big ones. Those are the
Yeah.
ones that I was trying to
No, yeah, I see one
tell
in this
you.
person's hand and it's very
Yeah.
large.
Yeah, they look really messed up though, don't they?
They look awful. This one
Yeah.
looks like it's crying.
Yeah. 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 I
It's
hate
just
them.
sad that it's stuck in this life as this thing.
Yeah. I know. I feel the
Thanks,
same.
Matt. Thanks.
So they're called camel spiders, but I don't think they're actually spiders because they have like 10 legs, which just makes it even better.
Yeah, I mean, based on my understanding of spiders, the 8-leg thing is pretty pivotal.
Yeah, right.
Nope, I hate this now. Thank you for that. This is like when you made me look at the big rat king.
Yeah, that was fun.
No.
So anyway, a giant roach would actually be horrifying. It's just for whatever reason when I read the scene, I didn't immediately feel horrified. I guess that's all I meant to say.
Sure. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
But that gross giant roach is not the only thing in the shed. We see a bunch of boards are kind of loosely put over what appears to be a big well, but actually is a descending stone staircase into, well, the world of fairy. I just want, like, we nailed this one. We nailed this one perfectly.
Yep, we did. The book cover was, in fact, the correct way to judge the book.
Yeah. It's not an eye, Matt, you stupid idiot. It's just a staircase going down into a well. Dummy.
Yeah. No, you're right. I should have been even more literal and read less deeply into things.
Yeah, that is, after all, our job. So Tape Bowditch informs us that the cockroaches are harmless, Matt, completely harmless. And in fact, they'll just kind of die on their own after a small amount of time because our air is deadly to creatures of that world. And it's not that I don't believe him, but also he like rushed out there with a gun like pretty fast the second he heard the thing. So, you know,
like like you think there are other things that come out of the well sometimes, maybe that do require a bit more prejudice.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like if the problem was just like every so often, cockroaches push up on the boards and come through, but they're gonna die anyway. I don't think you would be like, I need to get out there and
Yeah.
and put a stop to this immediately. Also, I just want to critique Bowditch and his watchmanship.
Uh,
Um, you gotta do a better job of protecting that well if things are crawling out of it when it gets warm outside. Maybe better
uh-huh.
than just a couple boards with some bricks on top of them, bro. Come on.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think basically the idea is like he's quite old and falling behind on all of his chores, and probably kept a better handle on things prior to his elderliness.
Sounds like a bunch of excuses. He's getting up on a ladder and cleaning out gutters. He can fucking nail some of these boards down.
I know I'm a third his age, and I don't clean gutters, so
Ooh, that reminds me. I definitely need to clean my gutters.
yeah, me too.
Ooh.
Yeah.
All right. So um from here, Bowditch tells us that he calls this portal, this entrance, the Well of the Worlds, and he tells the story about how he in his wandering days stumbled upon it quite by accident while walking in the woods one day. It's a perfect fairy story, right? Like, this is perfect. This is like a guy surveying the land, wandering through it, just happens to fall into this well that leads to another world. I really like this part, Matt, where he describes what it's like to cross the threshold into this other world. It was like being lightheaded, but it was more than that. I seemed to turn into a ghost, Charlie, like I could look down at my body and see right through it. I was insubstantial, and I remember thinking that we all are, really, just ghosts on the face of the earth, trying to believe we have a weight and a place in the world. Just love that. I just love that. It's a beautiful way to describe it, but also just this feeling of, I think this fits transfers between worlds that we've seen in other King stories, right?
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. It does. I guess I'm specifically thinking of the territories somewhat.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's beautiful. I like how this is written. It does sort of change the tone briefly. Like
Hmm.
it doesn't quite feel like Bowditch's normal voice. It almost feels like he's telling you a fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you're right. So this other world that we see is described as beautiful. This field of red poppies, a cottage, and in the distance, a great city. The air feels better. It's a bunch of consistent stuff we've seen about what other worlds feel like. So Matt, there's a city in the distance. Is this Lud? Is this Midworld, Matt?
Um, yes. Here's my thoughts. Here's my
Okay.
well considered thoughts. So, like, look, we eventually learned that the territories are like part of Midworld. Um, but that information about the territories being part of Midworld were provided in just the quintessentially King fashion, where it's like, what are the details of that? Like, where are the territories in Midworld? Like do the specific territories rules, like with twinners and stuff, apply outside of Midworld, or is it just, and then King is like, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. Stop, doesn't matter. None of that matters. Shut up. And that's how I think this place is related to Midworld. Where of course it's part of Midworld. Everything that's not Earth is Midworld. Where is it on Midworld? How is it written? Shut up. Stop asking questions. Doesn't matter. That's what I feel we're gonna do with this. This place might have its own name. It's probably not going to be called Midworld. It's probably going to be called Giant Land.
Oh, great name. Great
Yeah,
name.
yeah. Came up with that on my own just now. And and there may be no explicit references to the word Midworld. There may be oblique references to like Gilead, perhaps, or perhaps not. I almost think, regardless, I think King sees all these places as being connected in his mind. So, I'm basically I've decided that this is in Midworld. Yes. What do you think?
Um, Yeah, I mean, I honestly think the book is not going to have anything that definitively says yay or nay to this question. So my theory is that it's ultimately going to be up to you, the reader, to decide this or not. And I think your reasoning is as valid as any reasoning that could say no. It's just another world that exists completely independently. I think once again, King is playing with us a little bit here. Like they're not roses. It's not a field of roses we turn up on. It's a field of red poppies.
Hmm.
But we're being toyed with here a little bit.
Yeah.
We are meant to immediately be thinking midworld. He's doing this to us on purpose. So
Yep. Totally.
I really liked this part, Matt, and we're nearing the end of the chapter, but I wanted to talk about this quote with you. Once I told you that a brave man helps, but a coward only brings presents. Do you remember that? I brought presents, but only when I knew I wasn't brave enough to help when the terrible change came. I told myself I was too old, so I took gold and fled, like Jack scurrying down the beanstalk. Only he was just a boy. I should have done better. So this is something I kind of avoided intentionally bringing up in the script earlier this week, just because I knew it was going to get to this moment. But we get this beat of like Charlie questioning this quote, this a brave man helps but a coward only brings presents, and this is in my mind like a classic recurring Stephen Kingism that is going to appear over and over again and kind of become a mantra for our character as he goes through his adventures. It's an interesting turn of phrase, and I'm not sure like I got it right away. Even with this explanation, I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to convey outside of he feels like he was not brave. What do you think?
Well, it evokes a specific thing for me, but I feel really unsure about it. So what it evokes for me is like if there's a bereavement and you just bring, banana bread and you say, my condolences, and then you leave, that's bringing presents. But
Mhm.
if you stay and you help and you help you help do the laundry because the mom is too bereft to do the laundry, and you cook some meals, and you show up every day, it's much harder, it's much more painful because you've got to share in the grief, but that's what a brave man does. Now, where does that, why do I say that? I don't know. That's just like what popped into my head, and I can't think of anything else that makes sense.
Sure.
But yeah, does that make sense to you at all? Like,
Yeah, I like that. I guess the one thing I wasn't clear on, and maybe would have made this work on me, is like, and maybe this is part of the mystery, is I don't know what presents Bowditch is talking about when he says he just brought presents. Like,
right.
what does he mean? What does he mean by that? Like obviously what's going to happen in this world is like something is going to go wrong, something is going to break, something is going to happen. I think there's mentioned a little bit later that there's like a a, a, a thing called the flight killer and a god that's sleeping in this world, and so something occurs here. And Bowditch says, I'm going to get the fuck out of Dodge. He steals some gold from the leprechauns and he runs away. Um, but I just don't know. I don't know where the gave presents part fits. It just, I think the thing I'm probably going to think when all is said and done is that this is another beautifully crafted Kingism that becomes just in book mantra. But in the moment right now, I'm just it's not as clear to me.
Mhm.
But I think if I think back about the other ones in my first reads, that occurs sometimes, that like the full weight and meaning of the phrase doesn't become apparent to you until later. Or maybe I'll just end up thinking it's one of the weaker ones. But it stood out to me, but I was definitely not certain about it.
I kind of just like the feel of it, even if I'm not sure what it means.
Yeah, no,
Just
that's fair.
on a literal level, presence could mean like he brought, penicillin, right? Like I mean, it's sort of already a Dark Tower concept.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
but then he doesn't actually, when things get bad, he doesn't actually help. Um,
Yeah, could be.
just before it escapes me, the idea of the terrible god that in his long nose, it's like, okay, that's a clear overt Lovecraft reference,
Yeah.
to Cthulhu and his dreamless sleep, etc.
Yeah, let's not forget that we have a lot of gesturing towards Lovecraft in the early setup of this novel. So
Yeah.
I think you're right there. Yeah.
Sorry, before people jump on me, not dreamless sleep. He lies dead but dreaming. So gotta get it
Yeah,
right.
Matt. How dare you fuck that up, you
I know.
idiot.
It's like the opposite, really.
So yeah, basically though we learn that there's something horrible and dangerous in this other world, that this place used to be safe but isn't safe anymore. The city is definitely not safe, especially at night. It seems deserted, but it's not. We got this line here: was once grand and beautiful is now gray and cursed and diseased. But Matt, there's hope for Radar there. There's that sundial that can make her young again. And it's like, that's it. That's all I needed. Let's go. Let's go.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's funny how, like, as Bowditch is describing all these things, you're like, well, obviously Charlie shouldn't go down there. It sounds dangerous as hell. And what's the benefit? Oh, it could save Radar? Yeah, go down there.
Go.
Yeah.
Abandon everything. Go right now. Do not pass go. Go.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of where the chapter ends. Bowditch says that he's left some markings in the city that will lead Charlie to the sundial if he so chooses. He doesn't ever actually say like bring Radar down there. I think that thing that I think, to give Bowditch his credit, he is trying really hard not to like say, Charlie, this is your responsibility now. He's telling him he's doing what he said, which is he's telling him all the information, and he's allowing him to make his own choices.
Mm-hmm.
The one of the things he is telling him though is that like, hey, just imagine what would happen if like the government or someone more nefarious finds out that there's this portal to another world right beneath our feet, a world of untapped resources, etc., etc., etc. What would they do? And so he's outlining the threats, but he is really not saying like this is not like 11/22/63, where the dying man is like, please, you have to do this for me. This is your responsibility. Please, please. That's not that situation at all. It does really feel like Bowditch is ultimately allowing Charlie to make his own decision.
It's true, and probably the right decision is. I'm going to borrow a tune from one of our kids' favorite songs and go, cement truck, do 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 do, cement truck, do do. That was my first thought, is like, fill the tunnel with cement, pave it over, put a basketball court there. You're done, Charlie. You're done. Sell the house. Move on with your life. Of course, that's not going to happen. I know that. I know that's not going to happen.
Yeah. It'd make a pretty crummy story if it did.
Yeah, but I was immediate. Like I like this kind of story. The nature of it is just like nothing good's going to come out of going down there.
Yep.
So.
And yet he must, and yet we want him to, and yet.
Yeah.
And so that's where our chapter ends. Charlie stops the tape, kind of realizes that he believes Bowditch, even though he thinks I think he talked like he sounds crazy. He's totally crazy, but he never was crazy. He was always very lucid and clear. And also, I did just see a giant cockroach at a stairs leading down, and that's where we leave the chapter, Matt. That's where we leave it. So that's it. That is part 2 of our series. I guess, where do you think we go from here? Are we diving right into the well in next chapter? Like, are we crossing that threshold right away, or is there a chance we leave next week still not entering the world of what'd you call it, the world, the giant land? giant
land. I'm calling it giant land.
Okay, we'll see.
I once again predicted this week. This week we will go into the magical land.
So I mean, I'm trying to. I still, like, we talked about this a lot last week, that we were kind of still trying to discover like the shape of what the story is going to be. And I'm still like, I think it's a little more clear now. Obviously, he's going to take Radar with him down the stone stairs. He's going to pass through the scary bat cave into the world. He's going to meet the old woman at the cottage, and he's going to head into the city in order to get to bring Radar back to youth and save her. But I struggle to identify what I think is like going to be the main conflict in that situation. Obviously, there's going to be like denizens of the city that are bad, and he's probably going to have to fight in some way. But I just don't know how that actually unfolds.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, I think that might be one of these things where, like, we're going to have to meet a whole bunch of new characters that we don't know
Yeah.
yet, and
Mm-hmm.
that's, I mean, it could be super fun. I mean, it probably will be, but it is like we did a bunch of table setting, but then we're going to go down the hole. I mean, I think that's why, like, we can't just abandon. We spent too much time setting up his life in the real world to just be like, and now we abandon all of that and we go to the magic world. Like, there's got to be some back and forth. So I think my prediction is it's a story that really emphasizes the tension of like his increasing involvement in this other world while also having ties to his, former life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if we're going to do like jump in and jump out things,
Mm-hmm.
or if it's like all we're crossing, we're going, and we're not coming back until we're done.
Yeah. I guess I would predict some number of back and forths. Probably not too many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we'll definitely probably have like one exploratory mission, and then probably like a saying goodbye to dad moment. Um, and then
Mm-hmm.
he'll go. One thing we're not clear of is how time moves in this other place. Does time move faster? Does time move slower? Does time move the same? And so if he is going on a long journey through giant land, is it going to be an extensive one? We don't know.
Yeah.
All right, but maybe we'll figure out next week as we move into the next chapters. We will be reading chapters 11 through 14 next week, and we'll find out if we're heading to Giant Land or not.
I can't wait.
Me neither. All right, Matt, let's get into the discussion question for last week. We asked a pretty simple question last week, which was, what is your favorite fairy tale? So a lot of answers to this question. We got a lot of answers to this question, and I think some of them are pretty good.
Yeah. So starting out with Corinna 2020, the only answer is clearly The Princess Bride. Either the book or the movie, and you can't go wrong. It has everything: true love, sword fights, an evil prince, humor, and of course, at the end, love wins and they live happily ever after. This is such a smartly written story, and it remains my absolute favorite fairy tale.
It's a good answer. I agree. I love Princess Bride.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think smartly written is a great descriptor because it's like, on the one hand, it does have all of these kind of elementary tropes. On the other hand, it's like re-examining them in light of this kind of tongue-in-cheek comedy, but also at the same time, it maintains its heart. And it's just kind of, it kind of does everything perfectly.
Yeah. Steve Living Room says, favorite fairy tale, my first thought was The Phantom Toll Booth. It's such a great story for everyone about a bored kid learning to find beauty in the everyday world and how great learning is in general. It's a really good book. This is one my wife, when she was teaching third grade, is like they would cover it pretty extensively in school. She would read it to them over over the course of several weeks, and I think dressed up as characters, and they did like a whole thing with it. So this is a very special book to her and to me.
Cool. Yeah, I remember that book well from my youth. All right. Princess of Horror says, first discussion post, despite being a very constant listener. I'm going to go a little sideways here and say that the Rocky Horror Picture Show is my favorite fairy tale. I know, sci-fi is sort of its own thing, but nobody will convince me that Frankenfurter in his castle is not just another trickster, fey, full of shenanigans. The protagonists are sucked into this world of strange people with even stranger customs. They essentially have to perform for their freedom, and then they're left in the dust when the castle goes back to transsexual to grapple with what they've just lived through. It has a narrator who wraps things up in a tormented bow, and crawling on the planet's face, some insects called the human race, lost in time and lost in space and meaning.
Sure. I had never thought of Rocky Horror Picture Show as a fairy tale, but You've convinced me, Princess Sephora. I think you're spot on there. I love it.
I like the idea that something can be thematically a fairy tale without being literally a fairy tale.
Yeah, I agree. Busy Dad 82 says, this may not be my favorite fairy tale, but is the one that first came immediately to mind just because it was so impactful for me. Pan's Labyrinth. It is such a rich, layered story. Every time I watch it, I feel like I've peeled another layer of an onion. Love that movie. Absolutely love it. Matt hates it because he has no taste.
No, it's because it's sad, and things that are sad are bad.
Also, you don't like Guillermo del Toro anymore because
Oh yeah, that's true.
he likes clocks and you resent that.
He likes clocks a little too much, I would say.
No, we did a whole series on Guillermo del Toro's films. I think we both overall enjoyed them. I just think you, Matt, tired a bit of the repetition of the both story, thematic, and stylistic beats that he tends to employ.
That is exactly correct.
Mm-hmm.
You have represented my position well. All right. C. Thomas Howell, ATSM, says, obvious, I know, but I absolutely love The Wind Through the Keyhole. I don't think anybody else suggested that. So, I think you win by definition because it's the Dark Tower reference.
It is, of course, just literally not the right answer, but it's a working answer. Like that is literally crafted as a fairy tale. The story within the story is a fairy tale story. So I like it.
Yep.
Darren Longbeard says, my favorite fairy tale is Tolkien's of Beren and Luthien, a story that was first a poem in the Fellowship of the Ring, surmised in the Silmarillion, and eventually put into a full book, I believe, by Tolkien's son. That's correct. The story surmises the tale of Beren, a man stumbling across Luthien, an elf, and falling in love. Her father gives him an impossible task: infiltrate the heart of the evil lands and steal a Silmaril from Morgoth. Basically Satan and the guy that everyone feared, including Sauron and the Balrogs. They embark on a quest, a hero's journey, if you will, and tempt fate, fight destiny, and overall the story is a beautiful tragedy that foreshadows Arwen and Aragorn. I find it speaks to the power of what love can do against impossible odds, ultimate triumph, and ultimate despair. Tolkien considered it one of his 3 great tales, so much so that the character names are etched into his and his wife's tombstone. Great answer. Beautiful. I actually haven't read the novel that was created based off of the story. Have you?
No.
I think it's a relatively recent publishing too.
I am unfamiliar with this and probably should look into it. Yeah, I don't
2017
know.
it came out. Yeah.
Interesting. I don't know the story of Beren and Luthien as well as your average, massive Tolkien head. I just never sort of took to it as much as to the other stories. But yeah, it's that's great. I do know the basic idea. I mean, they mention Tulkas in their addendum to this answer, which is, I'm pretty sure, like a super Valar dog, which I think that's a perfect thing to mention in this book. Assuming I'm right about that.
Is Radar going to be that super Valar dog?
I think so.
Me too. I hope so.
Yeah. Cool. I mean,
that's a good question. Do we think Radar is anything special, or do we just think Radar is a dog? I think I'm kind of Radar is just a dog, just a really good dog.
I think that he is just a dog. Yeah. Wait, I think I'm wrong. I don't think Tulkas is the dog, but there was a dog. There was like a super dog.
Wrong. That's embarrassing.
Got something wrong about Lord of the Rings. Today is terrible, Scott. Mm-hmm. Today is the worst day ever. Because I got something wrong. I just looked up
Tulkas, and he looks like not a dog. He looks like a very, very buff man.
Who was the dog in the Silmarillion? Huon the Hound of the Valinor.
Yeah, you idiot! Can't believe you forgot my boy Huon the Hound.
I hate today. I hate Scott, can you delete this episode? Can we start over?
It's 1 a.m, so no.
Okay. All right. Let's just move past this. Let's just try to put this fucking travesty behind us. Baby Can You Dig Your Sam says, there are certainly several Neil Gaiman stories I could suggest, but I'm disappointed in him right now. So, yeah. As a modern fairy tale, you gotta love Labyrinth. a beautiful young heroine, dead mom, evil stepmother, teenage angst, Muppets, music, magic, quest to rescue a baby, and the devilishly charismatic Goblin King. I would also highly recommend Clive Barker's The Thief of Always. Definitely his spin on a fairy tale.
I haven't read that one.
Me neither. But yeah, Labyrinth is a modern classic. I love it.
All timer, yeah.
Yep.
Pear Jane says, so excited to be revisiting this book. I've forgotten how rich and wonderful it is. After some thought, I keep coming back to Hansel and Gretel. It's got the deep, dark woods, the wicked stepmother, the shitty father, the lost children. Sometimes I have to remind myself that Breadcrumb Trail is a direct reference to a few kids using their wits to try to escape a bad situation. And then we have the gingerbread house, which is the first time I learned the cardinal rule of other worlds. Don't eat the food. Then we have the heroics of Gretel shoving the witch in the oven. The kids are smart, resourceful, and brave. The interpretations have been endlessly creative, including, of course, Hannibal Lecter's story, which is Hansel and Gretel unhappily ever after. Don't at me. Pear Jane goes on to talk about their own dog that they lost, named Gretel as a teenager. I love dogs.
Me too.
My dogs
Hannibal
aren't with
Lecter.
me right now.
Yes, dogs. We didn't have as much dog chat this week, but I feel like that's because Radar was a bit less central to the actual story. I feel like when we go into the magical land, we're gonna have more dog chat.
Yeah, he's also like not doing very well, and so I don't want to think about that. So I just avoided talking about it.
Yeah. I never thought of Hannibal Lecter's story as a Hansel and Gretel story, but I think you're right.
Yeah,
you're right.
So do I.
All right. Richie Poger says, maybe not of all time, but right now I really like the story of Tom and Kam. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. From Vietnamese folklore. I'm married into a Vietnamese family, and my 2-year-old is getting the fairy tales from that culture right now. So I've learned, I've heard it a lot. It has a lot of similarities to Cinderella, but takes some crazy turns and gets super dark and has different variations that are regional. They made a movie, and my son has the song on repeat all day. That sounds delightful. Really cool. Yeah. I don't know this story.
I don't either. I mean, one thing that I love about these kind of stories, though, is they are kind of universal, and that every culture and every place around this world like has their own fairy tales, their own stories like this. It's like this is what Joseph Campbell was trying to do. By the way, he was not trying to create one universal story structure that all stories should follow. He was just like an anthropologist studying story cross-cultural and time and saying, hey, it's kind of weird that a lot of the stories we tell follow the similar beats regardless of like geography. Like these are cultures separated by hundreds and thousands of years and thousands of miles, and yet some of our stories and the events that happen in our stories are very similar. And isn't that interesting? Doesn't that perhaps say something about the universality of human existence? That's what he was trying to do. Why did we take this and say all stories must have this structure and go through this and do this? I hate it so much.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry for the rant. I know I've made this rant before, but I will continue to make this rant.
No, it's true. I totally agree. It's just it is very cool if you take it for what it is, which is like, yeah, there are certain patterns that we really like and we keep returning to. I just love the fact that the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story that we have, has references itself as a story passed on from the ancient times. and contains a story about a guy who is trying to like bring his friend back from death, basically, which is like, hey, that's like every story we ever tell. So
love it. All right, last but not least, we have Aqualungfish, who says, my favorite fairy tale is The Stinky Cheese Man. It's great. A sentient wheel of gross cheese runs around annoying people for a few pages. What's not to love? seriously though, my actual answer is Stardust, though I do actually like the SCM and the rest of the book. It's a great buy for a kid. The movie Stardust is the better version in my opinion, but either is good. This movie has everything you'd want from a fairy tale: a good but flawed protagonist, a clear goal and motivation that gets altered through the actions of the characters, an interesting set of antagonists and support characters, and some trials and pitfalls the protagonist has to overcome through wits and skill, and often luck. They go on to talk about Stardust a little bit more, but I just want to say I agree with that. I enjoy this movie quite a bit, actually. I have read the book too. I don't recall the book enough to definitively decide whether I like the book or movie more, but I really did enjoy this film. We did it for a canon episode of the Doofcast, and I think we both quite liked it.
Yeah, that's one of those movies where I remember watching it for the first time with like no expectations and just being blown away by how charming and inventive it is.
Yeah,
really fun movie.
definitely good story, good movie.
Mhm.
Great answer.
Yep.
All right, Matt, that's it for this week's discussion question. What are we asking the fine people to talk about next week?
Who's your favorite old man befriends a kid and then dies, leaving him all his wealth, but also his responsibility story?
Those.
Yeah.
Honestly, the fact that there's enough of these that hyper specific of a question has multiple answers, I think is pretty great.
Yeah. I referred to it as a Great Expectations earlier, which, it is sort of an example, although there's less of the responsibility angle to that one.
I think the responsibility is the angle that you need the least in your answers, but there's still options out there for that.
But you know how it works. If you continuously fit your idea to this premise, then go for it.
And we'll read it.
Yep.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week. Next week, as we said, Fairy Tale will continue with chapters 11 through 14. We are moving fast through this book, Matt. A couple weeks and we'll be halfway through, which is terrifying because we're almost at the end of this whole thing. But very exciting book, enjoying it a whole lot.
Me too. Remember, you can reach us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or over on x.com at kingslingerspod or on reddit.com/r/doofmedia. That's probably the best place to hang out. That's always a really active subreddit. So go check that out.
And make sure you check out our merch for Kingslingers, Doofcast, and everything we do. It's at doofmedia.myshopify.com. Tons of great stuff there. I have so many mugs now. I have just like an absolute shit ton of mugs, and I just keep rotating through all of our mugs, and I love them all.
Yes, any ridiculous dumb shit that we say ends up on a mug eventually.
Was there any ridiculous dumb shit today? I guess we could do like a mug, like a map of Giant Land.
A map of Giant Land, and it's just really dumb. Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
If you like Kingslingers and you want to support us, then please consider heading on over to patreon.com/doofmedia. As we talked about earlier in the show, you can check out the latest episode of Castle Talk. Again, a good show. Maybe this week we were a little bit let down, but overall a good show, and we have a lot of fun discussing it.
If you cannot afford to donate right now, we absolutely understand that. There are still tons of ways to help us out. I mean, just by listening, you're helping us out. Please keep sharing it. And of course, as we round out to the finish line, this is your, I guess, technically final chance to leave a rating and review and have that featured on the episode. This week's spotlight review comes from Emmy3212, who gives us 5 stars and says, "Fairy Tale, my advice is to just enjoy the journey. Thanks for all you do for us constant readers." Matt, I think this is in reference to last week I talked about how I'm a bit stressed out because I'm not sure. It's a lot harder to figure out what to pull and what not to pull for these episodes when I don't necessarily know where the story is going, and how we're kind of constantly trying to solve the story. I just want to say, I don't think you have to worry about anything there, Emmy. I think we're both very much enjoying this journey. Even if we like to wildly speculate on where exactly it's going.
Yeah.
But thank you for those kind words. Thank you for sending in that review. And thank you to everyone over the past 5 years that has done so. We are sitting on Apple Podcasts, at least in the US, at 599 reviews right now, which is incredible. A 4.9 at almost 500 reviews. I mean, we gotta be doing something right. So thank you guys for that. We really do appreciate it.
That's awesome. Yeah, thank you.
All right, folks, that's it this week. We will see you next week for more fairy tale. Perhaps we enter the land of Fae, the giant land, next week. Who knows? Maybe. We'll find out. We'll see you next week. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.